Good evening. I would like to welcome everyone to the Henry County Zoning Advisory Board meeting for Thursday, November 21st, 2019. This meeting is being televised on Charter Channel 180 and AT&T Uverse Channel 99. It will air daily at 1 p.m. with an additional airing on Thursday at 7 p.m. A video is available on demand on the county website. Please turn off all cell phones and laptops and set them to vibrate. Anyone wishing to speak tonight, please fill out a public hearing speaking card. A total of 10 minutes will be allowed for anyone wishing to speak in favor of a case and 10 minutes for anyone wishing to speak in opposition. For example, if 10 people wish to speak, they must share in a 10-minute slot. When you are speaking, please face the board and address us directly, not the audience. If you turn to speak to the audience, the board will assume you are finished and call the next speaker. At this time, we will have the Invocation and Prayer by Mrs. King.
Thank you. Please stand. Gracious God and Heavenly Father, we thank you for your presence in our lives and in this place tonight. We ask for clarity and discernment and good decisions, positive outcomes in all of the cases here tonight. And we ask these things in the name of our Lord and Savior, Jesus Christ. Amen. Amen. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
This meeting is now called to order. Do I have a motion to accept the agenda? I have a motion. Do I have a second?
A second.
It's been motioned and second. All in favor? Motion carries. All right, do I have a motion to accept the 2020 Zoning Advisory Board meeting schedule, which will be on the second Thursday of each month?
Excuse me, Mr. Chair.
Yes.
The second Thursday of the months on which the Zoning Advisory Board meets.
Yes, the second Thursday of the month, which the advisory board meeting. Do I have a motion to accept that agenda?
I make a motion to accept that agenda.
Do I have a second? It's been motioned and second. All in favor? Motion carries. Staff, do we have any comments?
Mr. Chair, there are no planning staff comments at this time.
Okay. If we have no comments, we will move forward with the first case.
The first case is a concept plan approval. And Mr. Chair, I'd like to note that this is not a public hearing. This is just a request for the Zoning Advisory Board to approve. This is Peacock Partnership of Atlanta, Georgia, requesting a concept plan approval for property located on the east side of Foster Drive in land lots 111 and 112 of the 6th District. The property consists of 5.07 plus or minus acres, and the request is for concept plan approval as required by zoning conditions. This is District 3, and the report is presented by Mrs. Yuitza Nieves, Planner 2.
Good evening, Chair and board members.
Good evening.
The request before you tonight is a concept plan approval request for property on the east side of Foster Drive. The subject property was originally rezoned as part of a much larger tract of land from RA, residential agricultural, to C2, general commercial in 1999. This 1999 rezoning request included the commercial development now known as Shops at Henry Crossing. It's where the movie theater is. Although the subject property was not developed at the same time as the rest on the west side of Foster Drive where the movie theater is, any development on the subject property must comply with the conditions of the original 1999 zoning conditions. So just to illustrate, all of this was included in the same 1999 zoning conditions. This developed independently, and now an out parcel wants to develop here in this area. So some of the zoning conditions require the development on the subject property to be presented to the Zoning Advisory Board. They've been highlighted. Those conditions are number 1, number 4, and number 10. This is in your exhibit book as well, and I'll summarize those very briefly. Condition number 1 requires site plan approval, in order to ensure structures are logically placed on the site to reduce potential traffic conflicts. Condition number 4 requires specific materials as well as those approved materials to be recorded as architectural covenants and to ensure uniformity with the Shops at Henry Crossing development as a whole. And condition number 10 requires the development to be bound to a master sign plan. So as regards to condition number 1, staff has evaluated the applicant's request and finds that the layout as proposed on the conceptual site plan dated September 9, 2019 to meet the condition of, to meet the intent of condition 1 regarding the layout and placement of the proposed structure as well as access. Regarding condition number 4, staff considers that the materials proposed as per the architectural standards and the conceptual elevation plan, both dated October 28, 2019, to meet the intent of condition 4 regarding architectural standards, appropriate materials, and uniformity with the Shops at Henry Crossing development. And finally, as regards condition 10, staff considers that the letter dated October 28, 2019, stating the applicant's intent to be incorporated into the existing Shops at Henry Crossing master sign plan to be sufficient for staff to incorporate the property into this master sign plan, which was approved in 2007. That means all future sign permit applications for the property shall be evaluated using this master sign plan criteria in addition to the countywide signage ordinance. Based on the applicant meeting the requirements of conditions 1, 4, and 10, planning staff recommends approval of the applicant's, approval of the concept plan approval with those 3 stipulations which I've placed on the overhead screen. And thank you, and I'd be happy to answer any questions you have.
Thank you. Does the board have questions for staff? Mr. Richard?
Okay, I think you've stated it very well as to the 3 aspects of this matter coming before the board. And you said this was an outcome of a decision by the Board of Commissioners back in 1999 to have each component or each separate property that's within the area that got rezoned would have to come before this board for a site plan approval. Is that correct?
Yes, Mr. Risher, that is correct.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. Any additional questions for staff? Okay, if not, we'd like the applicant to come forward, please. Please state your name and address for the record.
Kevin Franklin, Peacock Partnership Architects, 5525 Interstate North Parkway, Atlanta, Georgia, 30328.
Okay, Mr. Franklin, you have anything additional you'd like to add to staff recommendation?
I do not have anything additional unless there are any questions, which I'd be happy to answer.
Okay. Does the board have questions for the applicant? Mr. Richard?
Could you explain a little bit about the materials that will go into this building?
Let me bring up the elevation. So all of the materials that we've chosen are ones that are kind of listed in the stipulations. The materials are brick, insulated stucco, a wood siding, and then the rest of the material is just trim material, which includes just some metal copings and things like that.
All right, thank you.
Any additional questions for the applicant? Okay. Okay, if we don't have any questions, you may be seated, sir.
Okay.
All right. At this time, we'd like to allot 10 minutes for anyone speaking in favor of this case. Yes.
This doesn't require a public hearing.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Stacy. I wasn't aware of that. All right. Okay. Well, does the board have any additional questions for staff? Mr. Richard?
Okay, so I understand this is purely an administrative matter that the board is being asked to endorse based on the 1999 decision that each component of this overall project has to have a site plan approval from this board, but there is no public hearing, for this actually, or a place for public comment.
You're correct, Mr. Fisher.
Yes, that is correct.
Okay, thank you.
Well, being said, Mr. Richard, would the public like to comment on this concept plan? Do we have anyone in the audience that would like to comment on this plan? Okay. If not, call the case, please.
Concept plan approval, Peacock Partnership of Atlanta, Georgia, requests a concept plan approval for property located on the east side of Foster Drive in land lots 111 and 112 of the 6th District. The property consists of 5.07 plus or minus acres, and the request is for concept plan approval as required by zoning conditions. This is District 3, and the report was presented by Mrs. Yuritsa Nieves, Planner 2.
Okay. We've heard the case. Do we have a motion?
Yes, I would like to make a motion to approve the concept plan based on the overall site plan, the plan for materials, and the signage plan.
Have a motion. Do we have a second? Have a second. Any discussion? All in favor? Motion carries. Call the next case, please.
Under associated cases, COMP AM 1911, James H. Nutt III of Marietta, Georgia, requests an amendment to the comprehensive plan for property located on the north side of Hampton Locust Grove Road to the north of Brenly Way in land lots 209 and 210 of the 2nd District. The property consists of 41.268 plus or minus acres, and the request is to amend the future land use map designation from commercial to low-density residential. This is District 2, and the report is presented by Mrs. Yuritsa Nieves, Planner 2.
Good evening again, Chair and board members. The applicant is requesting to amend the future land use map designation for the property located on the north side of Hampton Locust Grove Road from commercial to low-density residential. This request is needed to support a concurrent rezoning request from RA, residential agricultural, to R3, single-family residence. This rezoning request will be heard later during this meeting. The Henry County Future Communities Map, as part of the comprehensive plan, serves as a general illustration of development as well as a policy guide to ensure compatible and unified development within specified areas of the county as a whole. It shows the subject property, highlighted by the red arrow at the bottom of the screen, as being within a suburban character area. Suburban character areas are described within the comprehensive plan as residential areas of primarily single-family developments and local serving retail, excuse me. So the policies outlined in the comprehensive plan are intended to ensure that new developments promote a better sense of place and preserve valued elements of community character. In this case, the request to amend the future land use map designation from commercial to low-density residential for the subject property seems reasonable based on the current zoning trends of the area. Furthermore, the low-density residential designation allows for single-family residential developments of up to 2 dwelling units per acre. The applicant's rezoning request, which we will be hearing subsequently, does concern a proposed development that is within that limit. With that being said, staff recommends approval of the applicant's request, and I'd be happy to answer any questions you have.
Okay, thank you. Does the board have questions for staff? Okay, if not, I would like the applicant to come forward, please. Please state your name and address for the record.
Good evening, Chair, members of the board. My name is Steve Moore, Bass Consulting, 1350 Keys Ferry Court, McDonough, Georgia. Okay. Here tonight representing Mr. Nutt on, at this time, the future land use map change. In order to, and I understand the rezoning is the next item on the agenda, but I feel like I need to at least explain what the purpose of our request is, which facilitates the, or necessitates rather, the land use map change. This property came in front of you guys back in, I believe, July with a proposed zoning change to C3. So we're all located on the north side of Hampton Locust Grove Road, east of Wycliffe subdivision, and just west of the public shopping center. It is zoned RA. Our request ultimately under this next hearing will be for R3 for a 58-lot subdivision. The zoning that came before for C3 was for a trailer storage facility associated with the industrial buildings north of this site. I happen to be at that hearing on another case and had a chance to see the concerns of the neighboring residents in Wycliffe of noise pollution and lighting and dust and all of the obnoxious things that may come from that type of use. As a result, the owner and the group that had contracted the property have terminated their contract for the purchase. My client, who is the owner, they've owned the property for over 100 years. They would like to sell it and feel like this is a more compatible and appropriate use, especially given the surrounding neighbors to the in Wycliffe. So that is the basis for our request. I think if it's okay with you, I can just kind of defer to the next time to talk about house sizes and layout details, but it's at your pleasure. I'm happy to present the whole case now if you think it's appropriate.
Well, when we allot the 10 minutes for in favor, if we have no one else coming forward, I'd like for you to do it at that point.
Okay, or I can finish it right now, and then it won't be much to talk about during the next
go
case.
ahead.
Okay, I'll do that. So as you see on this layout, we have 58 lots. The request that we are making for the future land use map modification is to low density residential, which allows up to 2 units per acre net. This property is located also in the Indian Creek Watershed Protection District. So the Henry County Water Authority has a 1.75 units per acre net maximum limit for this property. That is what's driving the 58 lots. Technically, it's possible to get more lots on there, but again, that 1.75 units per acre is the driving factor. As it's designed, we have buffers located on all 3 sides of the property. We are adjacent to industrial to the north, so we have a 40-foot code required buffer there. We're adjacent to commercial to the east, and that requires a 40-foot buffer as well. And then we're proposing a 30-foot buffer here, although one is technically not required by code. We are proposing one there, and then we're also proposing that same buffer along the frontage of the future right-of-way yet to be acquired but preserved based on at least what's available as far as any widening plans and realignment plans of Hampton Locust Grove Road. So that's what's shown down here. Because we're over 50 lots, we have 2 entrances that are shown on that site plan. There was no recommendation or size, home size listed in the staff report, and we didn't provide that at the time. What we are proposing is 2,200 square foot minimum heated space. That exceeds the approved conditions associated with Wycliffe phases 1 and 2, and is the same condition that was approved for Weston Park. The representative, we've had an idea on the architecture. that is being proposed. This is consistent with the staff recommendation of for the architectural controls. It is a craftsman style, but it has the brick water table. At a minimum, some houses have more brick in the front, but it's got that craftsman style throughout. We do understand that staff has recommended approval with 5 conditions. We have no conditions with 1, 2, and 4. Condition number 3 pertains to the side entry requirement. It says side entry where feasible. Based on the lot size that we're proposing, we have no problem conditioning these to be all side entry. It's appropriate for this size lot. So if it pleases the board, we'll be happy to strike that where feasible part off of that condition number 3. Condition number 5 is one that I do have question on, and I would like consideration of a change with that. Condition number 5 requires that the detention pond be located on its own lot. When we get hired to do any project, the first thing that we look at is the ULDC to make sure we're compliant with those rules. The ULDC section 12.02.02 number 15 says that lots with detention ponds shall meet the minimum lot area requirements outside of the area of the detention pond. So what that means is that if the pond is here, that area right there between the road and the lot, the road and the pond rather, needs to meet the minimum zoning requirements of 18,000 square feet, which we do. So I would just ask that that condition be worded or removed just to create any conflicts with what the ordinance already requires. Short of that, I think that covers my presentation, and at this point, whether it's, I guess technically your questions will be on the comp plan change, so I'm happy to answer any of those questions.
Does the board have questions for the applicant?
Actually, for staff, I have one question.
Okay, go ahead.
Ms. Nunez, the last recommendation that he had asked consideration for about putting the pond on the singular lot, does the staff see any reason why that would be a problem? Is there any reason why that wouldn't work the way he's proposing it?
That condition was recommended by our stormwater department, and with all due respect, I would prefer to keep it on the comp plan request now, and then we'll get into the rezoning later, just so we don't go on.
Thank you.
Okay. Any additional questions for the applicant? Okay, if not, you may be seated, Ms. Moore. All right. At this time, we'd like to allot 10 minutes for anyone wishing to speak in favor of this case. Please state your name and address for the record.
My name is Don Plummer. I live at 413 Gloucester Drive, Locust Grove, Georgia. That's the Wycliffe subdivision, which is on the west side of this proposed development. I have a, sorry, I'm not supposed to turn that direction, but it looks like the developers answered a lot of questions. I do have a recommendation or request that's on the map on the west side where they currently have a 30-foot buffer, which is not required. We would like to see a 40-foot buffer there, like on the other sides, if that's possible. We would also like to see on that property line on the west edge, if developer builders could install a solid fence, doesn't have to be giant fence, but a solid fence along the west side of the property. We would also like the developers to plant some trees or some kind of shrubbery along that line as well. I'm not sure how that conforms to, I don't know what your zoning requirements are with respect to setbacks and all that on that lot line, but we'd like to do that if it's possible. The other thing is just a request that when the developer is installing or making connections to the utilities, we have several people in the community who work out of their homes, so interruptions in internet service, that would be a problem for them. So we would like to have notification, as much notification as possible, 72 hours if that's not unreasonable. Or if there's going to be a disconnection of electricity, cable services, or water service. We just like to have advanced notification. I don't know if that's required or not.
Let me clarify one thing, sir. Are you speaking in favor of this case or in opposition?
I'm speaking in favor.
Oh,
We
okay.
think it's a great deal.
Okay.
I mean, compared to, from what I heard, I mean, the 2,200 square foot homes heated looks, and from the architectural plans that were put up, it looks like we're looking at a mirror, almost a mirror image, maybe a notch better than the Wycliffe subdivision. So we are speaking in, or I'm speaking in favor, and a few other people, because we would prefer to have residential there than commercial. I think from the last meeting where we discussed the commercial aspect, you know, we were not real pleased with that. So yes, I'm speaking in favor of this.
Thank you. Thank you.
I do have a couple questions for the developer. The storm sewer, which is now in the two lots, it's like 23rd, I can't read it, but anyway, up in the
23, yeah.
northeast corner. The discharge from that retention basin, we would just like to know or to point out, where is that discharge point going to be? Is it also going to be a pipe that discharges into something, or is it going to discharge in a waterway? The reason we're asking the question is that some of the people that live to the north on Wycliffe Drive are having issues with water runoff currently in their backyards. And some of those people have walkout basements. So we would like to make sure that people are cognizant of the fact that runoff there from that, how that's handled, could be a problem. Not saying it is a problem, it could be a problem. The other thing, just curiosity question, is a developer proposing, or is it required that he do a berm or tree barrier between the development and Hamden Locust Grove Road on the south? Just probably they'd like to do that. I think it'd be in their best interest, but we'd just like to know if they plan on doing that. Assume there's some. And the other question is, will there be any proposed walking trails, community house, community pool, or tennis courts, et cetera? The proposed drawing here doesn't show anything like that, so we're assuming there won't be, but just like to confirm that. And that's all I have. Thank you very much. Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
You're very welcome.
We have about 5 minutes, 34 seconds. Anyone else wishing to speak in favor of this case? Please state your name and address for the record.
Darrell Huff, 900 Vanderver Court, Locust Grove, Wycliffe subdivision. I'm just curious how many of my neighbors are here today. So we've got a pretty good showing, and we do appreciate the proposed change, but we do have a couple of questions too. Some of the concerns we've already addressed as far as the 30-foot setback on the front near Hampton. And I guess, I don't know if 2 entrances are better or 1 entrance is better. I know he talked about 50-something lots in there. We've got about 180 homes in Wycliffe. There's 1 in, 1 out. We're good with that. We can manage with that. My concern with that, would 2 create more accidents or would it create less? That's just a proposed question for somebody else to think about. I know that where we're at, coming out of the curve, I've seen near accidents. I know we had a fatality there already. And so that's just something for somebody to think about. The other thing is like he was talking about, the gentleman before me, is there anything proposed to the road of Hampton to the south of that? I know in a lot of subdivisions in Henry County and close to Wycliffe, and I don't know if I can show pictures or not. You show me. Okay. We see a lot of this, and that's something we certainly don't want to see. You can see there's still houses for sale in that area right there, and that's something we don't want to see on Hampton. I don't think anybody would. You can see more of it, another subdivision in the area. And then if you go over, and this is not a great photo here, but if you go over to, I think it's Kingston, just a little bit east of us in Wycliffe, what that is, that's a dark fence, and that probably sets off a couple of 100 feet. And then they've also got a good look at the front right up by the road. That's probably 30 feet off the road if you've driven by there. And then you can see over to the right where they've planted all the trees and the fence back there. So that's just something that we would like to see versus a privacy fence that's going to run down and nobody's going to take care of in the next, 6-7 months after it's new and they've sold, everybody leaves and abandons it. And that's just what we don't want to see. But we're happy to have neighbors next door and not a parking lot for 1,000 trailers. So we appreciate that.
Thank you, sir. Anyone else wishing to speak in favor of this case? We have about 2.5 minutes, a little over 2.5.
My name is Donna Johnson. I live at 101 Brindley Way, which is directly across from, where is this at? From the proposed, from the proposed construction. My major concern is traffic during construction, because most of that is directly across from my driveway or my exit out of Brindley Way onto Hampton Locust Grove. I'm concerned about construction traffic. It already gets heavy. There's a lot of trucks on the road. I don't know if that road is rated for semis or whatever, but we see a lot of those. And also the buffer, as mentioned before, would be a big concern to us. We would prefer some type of landscaping berm to cut down any kind of noise and keep up the appearances. We do have very good looking, Wycliffe and Brindley Way have nice looking homes and landscaping, and we would prefer to keep it that way. And I concur with the comments made by the two gentlemen that preceded me up here. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Anyone else wishing to speak in favor of this case? Okay, at this time, we'd like to allot 10 minutes for anyone wishing to speak in opposition. Anyone wishing to speak in opposition? Okay, if no one's coming forward, we'd like the applicant to come forward, please. Does the board have additional questions for the applicant?
I have a question for staff, if I
Okay.
can. My experience so far, and correct me if I'm wrong, and it has no bearing on the outcome in terms of my motion on this case, are we typically reluctant to change the future land use development map in the past? Is that, because it's usually flip-flopped.
We appreciate having the discretion to objectively evaluate a request and to make a recommendation either way based upon the merits of the request. That being said, we would like to think that our future land use map is substantially the best, especially as
Accurate.
young as it is.
Right. I guess that's what I'm getting to, is it seems to me like typically we would be reluctant to change that. In this case, it makes obvious sense to do so. I was just curious,
Yes,
based on precedent, that's all.
Any additional questions for Mr. Risher?
Yes, I'd like to ask Mr. Moore if you could put the site plan on the screen for a minute. If you could indicate in which direction that the stormwater from the retention pond at the northwest corner of this project, which way would the stormwater flow out of the pipe?
There's the existing detention pond, I suppose, or at least one of them for the Prologis is approximately where I circled. there, well, although we haven't done a detailed design of that system and how big the pond is going to be, but it will, I mean, with a typical detention pond, all the water will be collected, slowed down to a rate that is equivalent as what it is today at a pre-development rate, will be treated appropriately, cleaned, and then slowly discharged out of that pond into some natural drainage path. Most likely it would be in the vicinity of that detention pond, and I'm not sure if that pond is, if you look at the images on the aerial photos, it looks like it's in bad shape. I don't know if it was maybe a temporary pond. I don't know if that's their permanent pond, but nonetheless, we will find the right spot. Obviously, if someone's got existing drainage conditions downstream, I would hope, not hope, but I don't think that's coming from this property. It sounds like it may be associated with that pond. I even talked with the owner today. He still has some relationships with the folks that own that building there, and it may be possible that we can do a joint pond that kind of fixes that whole area right there. But either way, that's the location where it would be discharged, and it'll meet all of the rules at the Henry County Stormwater requirements.
If that's where it's going to be, then it would appear to be that it would drain towards the north behind the industrial building.
Yes, sir.
Home Depot.
But it wouldn't be any additional water than what's getting there today. It'll be slowed down in that pond and cleaned and then released at a slow rate. So it essentially shouldn't exacerbate anything, but nonetheless, it's something that we as engineers will definitely evaluate as we're designing that pond.
Okay. Any additional questions? Mr. Carmichael.
Mr. Moore, could you explain once again why you're requesting that the condition number 5 be changed, altered, since you indicate that you will be complying with this condition?
For condition number 5, we'll comply with the requirements with the requirements of the Henry County Stormwater Ordinance and the ULDC regarding the design and the release of the water associated with that pond. The ULDC does not require the pond to be on its own lot. It allows for that to be on the backs of some lots to hide it from potentially the street, and as long as that lot, the residual lot area meets the minimum of that zoning ordinance, and that's all we're asking. Otherwise, the pond's going to be basically in the same spot on lot 22, except it's going to stretch up to 22 and it's going to be visible from the road. We would rather have a house adjacent to the road and the pond in the back. It will be fenced, it'll be screened. That's also a requirement of the ordinance. So that was my purpose for that request.
Okay. Also, you heard here tonight that there was a request to increase the size of the buffer from 30 feet to 40 feet. Is that a problem?
I don't see that's a problem.
Okay. And also a solid fence, I think the gentleman indicated on the east side of the property.
Yes, sir. And I actually talked to my client this morning, or this afternoon rather. One of the things that we know is that this site has a lot of topsoil. It's been cultivated as, I think, peas or something, butter beans, I think, for the last however many years. We know that there's a lot of topsoil, and we know that topsoil is going to have to go somewhere. So one of the things we talked about was potentially using that along that frontage that was also discussed and along that east side. We didn't necessarily talk about a fence, but I think a fence is fine. Again, the detention pond is going to be fenced anyway, and it would just be a matter of extending it down. It does look like, looking at aerials, that there's some relatively, I don't know how old the aerials were, but there was a new fence on one of the lots, and they actually had planted some Leland cypress trees behind the fence. But again, we will mitigate whatever voids there are in that buffer, whether it's through fencing or additional landscaping or berming, to provide that visual screen. We understand that's important for both sides, and I think we have the ability to easily accommodate that.
Thank you.
Okay. Any additional, Mr. Brown?
Yes, and again, in relation to the retention pond here, and as you noted, the one there on the Home Depot lot seems like it's in disrepair. How are they going to gain access to make improvements to this retention pond in the event that the homeowners downstream start receiving a lot more water.
Easements be provided.
Yes, that's,
Even if it crosses.
this map, I apologize, this map does a little bit better job of communicating that level of detail, but there is an easement there that will go between those lots that will provide access. It'll have a gravel driveway over top of it, and then it'll terminate with gates to be able to access that pond, but that's how we would accommodate that. And this is done, we do this a lot in subdivisions, it's very typical.
Well, I have a question in reference to this. In reference to the fence, what type fence will you be providing there?
We haven't obviously thought through that far, but I would say that we would be willing to do some type of an opaque fence, whether it's a wood fence. I mean, I know the picture shown of some privacy fences that have been less than, that haven't held up very well. It may be better to do some type of a chain link with the slats and landscaping, but I mean, I'd be willing to at least consider, some recommendation of an opaque fence, and then we'll try to figure out what the best type of opaque fence would be.
Okay. I have, now, you've heard some of the concerns.
Yes, sir.
Are you prepared to address some of those concerns?
I can address them now, or we can wait till the rezoning, whichever you prefer.
Well, being that has came up, let's go ahead, let's move forward with those concerns.
Okay. So I think the first one was the 30 to a 40-foot buffer, and again, I don't think we have a problem with that. The fence we just discussed, I think that was resolved. There was comments about plants and trees along that buffer as well, and again, we will be willing to mitigate or enhance the existing landscape along that property line and to fill in any gaps that don't naturally exist. And it does look that there are a good bit of tree stand, especially as you move, I think, north into the property. But where it's void, we'll add landscaping, and we can take that as a condition. Let's see, there was a comment about the utility connections as we're doing construction. Certainly, that is, I think, normal practice, but we can, I can talk with the property owners and get the representative of the HOA and notify them as this thing moves through with the construction plans and permitting, and put ultimately the general contractor in touch with them to make that happen. The storm discharge, I think we discussed that. Let's see. Berm along Hampton-Lucas Grove Road and buffer, yes. There's no intent or desire to put a board fence up along Hampton-Lucas Grove Road. These will be nice lots, these will be nice homes, and they need to have a nice entrance as people are coming into this community. Again, with the level of topsoil that I know we're going to encounter, there's ample opportunity to berm and landscape that entrance. I will say that the one challenge that we'll have is pinning down the exact alignment of that future right-of-way, or at least having a discussion with SPLOST that, because what is true is that one day, and I don't know when, I don't know if it's on any kind of SPLOST list, but I know that they had, in the last SPLOST, it was approved to acquire the right-of-way, which I don't think they've acquired it because they haven't, at least they haven't from our client. But if and when that road ever gets widened, it would obviously impact any kind of landscaping you do. So it either need to be, everybody either need to know that up front, or it needed to go in the future, outside of the future right-of-way, which may look odd. So I don't know, but we will work through that. But yes, we want the entrance to be nice. We want people to be impressed as they drive past it. And that will be done in the form of some type of entry feature, berms, landscaping. I'm not sure that it'll have a brick columns and wrought iron fence like Kingston, but it will definitely have some very nice appeal as it drives by. No privacy fences that are torn down. That's not the intent, and that's not the price and the customers that we'll be attracting for this project. There are no 58 lots, it'll be tough for a homeowner association probably to support a swimming pool or anything like that. There is no builder currently picked for this. The applicant is the owner. He may develop it. He may sell to a developer who would then, either develop and build or sell the lots to a builder. That builder may choose to have an amenity as part of their, sales strategy for this property. But as it sits currently, we're not proposing any type of amenities. There was a question about why 2 entrances. Believe me, I'd love to put 1 entrance if we could. The ULDC requires us to provide 2 for anything more than 50 lots. It is possible, and we will confirm site distances as we move through this process. In fact, I think that's condition number 1 or 2, that we have to confirm intersection site distance. It is possible that one of those entrances may be able to be a right-in, right-out only, which might maybe limit some congestion, and that may depend on adequacy of site distance at either of those 2 locations. I feel pretty confident that the westernmost entrance works. The one on the east could shift somewhat, and again, that's going to change when the Hampton Locust Grove Road ever gets widened and realigned. All that entrance is going to get reworked, and most likely they would restrict it to a right-in, right-out at that point anyway. But nonetheless, we will take that into consideration as we're moving through this design, and once we get through this process, we will definitely be in coordination and consult with SPLOST to see if there's any updated plans associated with that. But again, if we could put 1, we would love it, but your ordinance doesn't allow it. And I think that addressed all the questions that I wrote down.
Okay. Mr. Brown?
Yes, again, back to the retention pond, who's going to maintain the easement there? Also, the fencing that is going to be surrounding the retention pond itself?
Yes, sir.
Who's going to be responsible for that, as well as should the flow of water downstream be greater than what's currently present there? How is that going to be taken care of?
Well, there will be a mandatory HOA for the subdivision, which will maintain those access points and fences, landscaping, and that type of stuff. Related to who would deal with any kind of releases from the pond that are in excess of pre-development, I guess that would ultimately go to stormwater as they do their inspections. I can't speak to that. Maybe Stacy can.
And Mr. Brown, I'm not an expert on stormwater process, but it is my understanding that if something fails or if something needs to be inspected, that our stormwater management department would be there and would be able to take advantage of that access easement to be able to inspect that pond and perhaps take action to it, which is why we took it seriously when they requested that condition to say that that pond would sit on its own lot. But as far as all the whys and wherefores, I can't tell you at this time exactly why they would request such a thing.
All right, thank you.
Okay. Well, being said, Stacey, I have a question in reference to that, and that is, say at some point the fence fails, who does that responsibility fall on?
It's my understanding that the stormwater management department would require repair because that is safety to keep people from accessing that facility, which could be dangerous.
Okay. So that falls back on stormwater?
Yes. Now, the property itself would be owned by a private individual, but whether that individual would be required to make repairs if there's a mandatory homeowners association, I'm not certain.
Yes, technically by deed, yes, there will be, the land under the pond would be owned by someone. There would be an easement over top of that controls that. And in the past, what we've done is that easement is written to Henry County Stormwater Department as well as to the HOA. That way, if something ever happened with the HOA, Henry County Stormwater has access to go in and maintain and do whatever they need to do within that pond area. Also, with every pond in Henry County, you have to file a stormwater certification, which is a form that gets recorded at the courthouse before you can even get your development permit, that basically assigns the liability and ownership and maintenance responsibilities of that pond to that developer or that HOA or whoever that representative is. But it ensures that there's going to be somebody that's going to, on a regular basis, annual basis, inspect the outlet control structure, make sure that the dam, if there's a dam, that it's mowed properly and that it's void of any kind of trees or anything that's growing in there that could long-term damage the dam. So there are rules and provisions that Henry County has put in place to keep people from this kind of problem.
Okay. Any additional questions for the applicant? Okay, if not, you may be seated, sir.
Yes, sir.
Do we have any questions for staff? Not, call the case.
Yes, sir. This is the first case associated for James H. Nutt III, COMP AM 1911. James H. Nutt III of Marietta requests an amendment to the comprehensive plan for property located on the north side of Hampton Locust Grove Road to the north of Brenly Way in land lots 209 and 210 of the 2nd District. The property consists of 41.268 plus or minus acres, and the request is to amend the future land use map designation from commercial to low-density residential. This is District 2, and the report was presented by Mrs. Yuitza Nieves, Planner 2.
Okay, we've heard the case. Do we have a motion?
I do. I'd like to make a motion, and to be clear, we'll talk about those conditions that we talked about for the next case. And I make a motion that we do accept and go ahead with and staff approval and approve this case.
Okay. Do we have a second? Second. We have a motion and a second. Any discussion? All in favor? Motion carries. All right, call the next case, please.
RZ 1920, James H. Nutt III of Marietta, Georgia, requests a rezoning from RA Residential Agricultural to R3 Single-Family Residence for property located on the north side of Hampton Locust Grove Road to the north of Brenly Way in land lots 209 and 210 of the 2nd District. The property consists of 41.268 plus or minus acres, and the request is for a single-family residential subdivision in District 2, and the report is presented by Mrs. Yuitza Nieves, Planner 2.
Good evening again, Chair and board members. The request before you is a request to rezone the property located to the north of Hampton Locust Grove Road and to the north of Brindley Way, as highlighted in green in your exhibit books and as seen on the overhead screen. From RA, Residential Agricultural, to R3, Single Family Residence, for the purpose of developing a single-family residential subdivision on sewer. The area surrounding the subject property contains a variety of single-family residential zoning districts. Now, properties to the south of Hampton Locust Grove Road generally do not have access to sewer, and we can see this illustrated by the abundance of the white color or the RA zoning district to the south of Hampton Locust Grove Road. However, properties to the north of Hampton Locust Grove Road generally do have access to sewer, and we can see that difference by the different colors of the zoning districts, the light yellow, the dark yellow, and the pink color, which is planned development and R3. So the subject property currently has a commercial future land use designation. However, the previous case was the comprehensive plan amendment, which this board just recommended approval for a low-density residential future land use designation, which allows up to 2 dwelling units per acre. As indicated by the applicant earlier, the subject property is within the Indian Creek Long Branch Creek Watershed Protection Area and is therefore limited to a maximum density of 1.75 dwelling units per acre net. And the development they are proposing at this time is a density of 1.75 dwelling units per acre net. With that being said, staff has evaluated the applicant's request and recommends approval with the 7 conditions, which I will now place on the screen.
Okay.
I know there was I'm so sorry, 5 conditions. I know there was talk earlier of condition number 5. Any stormwater management facility is to be located entirely within one lot. As part of staff's evaluation of all rezoning requests, we reach out to all county departments, Henry County DOT, Fire Department, Stormwater, the Building and Plan Review, as well as Planning and Zoning staff's evaluation. Normally, we don't get a lot of comment, so the fact that our stormwater department felt the need to request this as a condition, we took it very seriously. I do not have at this time, I don't know why. I'm not an engineer. I don't know much about stormwater management facilities, but I can certainly have that information, talk with our stormwater department, and have a better explanation for Board of Commissioners as to why they requested this. I'd be happy to answer any other questions you have.
Does the board have questions for staff? Mr. Carmichael.
How is the Henry County Cities Joint 2040 Comprehensive Plan relevant to this request?
Okay, so the request we just heard was a request to modify the future land use map. The future land use map is part of the joint cities county comprehensive plan. So the property currently has a commercial designation. What that means is a commercial rezoning would be supported by that future land use designation. However, at the moment, the applicant has a concurrent request to change that from commercial to low density. It has not yet been approved. It needs to go to the Board of Commissioners. But at this time, staff recommended approval of that change, and the board also recommended approval of that change. And the zoning district that the applicant is requesting is compliant with the change they are requesting and the change that has been recommended for approval.
Okay, thank you.
Any additional questions for staff? I had one question. I think you mentioned that he's recommending 1.2 units, and you said 1.75. Is that correct? Which is?
It's 1.75. Mr. Nelson, I'll put the site plan up here.
Okay.
So, right here.
Yes.
Difference, and you need to correct me if I'm wrong. That future land use map, low density residential, is up to 2. But if this property is located within a protected watershed, it would be 1.75.
Okay. Where did I get the 1.2? That was mentioned earlier, I believe.
I don't recall the 1.2.
Okay. All right. 1.75 it is.
Yeah, so it's here on the site plan. Net density proposed 1.75 units per acre. Max net density is 1.75, and that's that note here that explains that it is in the Indian Creek, Long Branch Creek watershed protection area, which is limited to 1.75.
Okay. All right. Any additional questions for staff? If not, we'd like to call the applicant forward, please. Please state your name and address again for the record.
Good evening again. Steve Moore, Bass Consulting, 1350 Keys Ferry Court, McAllen, Georgia.
Okay. Anything additional you'd like to add, Mr. Moore?
Only with regards to this pond, and I'm not 100% sure. I know that I think Yuritsa indicated that it hasn't come up before, and I can only speak on behalf of the engineering side of what we do and the plan review side. And there's a new plan reviewer at Stormwater, which is doing a great job. And this is just she's doing her job of research of different ordinances. And I'm just only assuming that's why they've never commented before, is because they just haven't had the ability and the time to review zoning cases. But my only position on this is that we're not doing anything outside of what the ordinance allows. And there's a track record of plenty of times where this has worked, and it really is a much more desirable way to do this than to have this pond front and center right up on the road. The ponds end up being, if they're maintained properly, the slopes are such that they're not a big visual eyesore. They're screened, and it's okay for them to be in the backs of those lots rather than tucked up onto the street. So that's why we felt like it was just a more appropriate design with what we had here. But I think that's I think that's the reason, and I'm not trying to speak for stormwater, but based on other reviews that we've had, I feel like that may be the reason why it hasn't come up in the past, and it was here. But again, I'll just defer to your judgment on that.
So if you guys went with the county recommendation, you would lose one lot?
Yes, sir.
Oh, okay. All right. Any additional questions for the applicant? Okay. If not, you may be seated, sir. At this time, we'd like to allot 10 minutes for anyone wishing to speak in favor of this case. 10 minutes for anyone wishing to speak in favor. If no one's coming forward, we'd like to allot 10 minutes for anyone wishing to speak in opposition. 10 minutes for anyone wishing to speak in opposition. Okay. Does the board have any additional questions for staff or the applicant?
I do for staff.
Okay.
It seems like this retention or detention pond is kind of hanging us up here on a bit of a technicality, perhaps. Steve's explanation, would you say that that's accurate in terms of what happened here as far as the assessment of one lot, isolated lot, as opposed to, we'll say, multiple or two or 1.5? That there was just more scrutiny given as opposed to what's happened in the past?
One can only speculate.
Yeah.
I have to tell you, I don't know, but the concept of putting the detention pond, much like what's illustrated, is absolutely in accordance, to my understanding, with our Unified Land Development Code. I don't know that there's anything wrong with that at all. However, the purpose of a zoning condition is to go beyond the minimum standards of the ordinance if there's a better way. And if you agree, this is the time to make that requirement.
Mr. Richard. Oh, I'm sorry. Are you finished, Ms. King?
Yes, I am, thank
Okay.
you.
Mr.
That's fine,
Richard.
thank you.
Well, I'm wondering if we even need that condition about the stormwater facility, since it's already governed by the Uniform Land Development Code.
If this board agrees that this detention pond needs to sit on its own lot and not on a house lot, we absolutely recommend that this condition remain.
Well, I'd be in favor of just taking that condition out, since it's already determined by our own codes.
It's legal.
Okay. Well, I'd like to go back to staff. Staff made the recommendation. What's the true justification of it?
Again, this condition was provided by our stormwater management department, similarly to how our transportation conditions are provided by Henry County DOT. I'm not a fireman. If there's a condition regarding fire access, we get that straight from the source. Same for DOT. For example, like the right-of-way condition, that came from our DOT department. Like Stacy said earlier, the purpose of a zoning condition is to require stricter standards than what our ULDC allows. While an R3 subdivision can develop by right with 1,800 square feet, the applicant is proposing something larger, and that, in that case, would be appropriate for condition. I see it in the same vein, that these zoning conditions are requiring stricter standard than what the code allows.
Understood.
And at this point, it really is only speculation, since we don't have a person from stormwater here. Perhaps in their experience, they have had issues in other places with taking advantage of their access easement across private property. I just don't know at this time.
Okay.
And I would be very happy to provide that information to during the Board of Commissioners meeting. If you feel it necessary, or if you feel you want to remove the condition, I will go back to, or staff will go back to Stormwater to evaluate, see why they want that, and if we deem it required, we can always recommend it to the Board of Commissioners.
Okay.
I'm inclined to remove it. That's just a comment, just throwing it out there.
Okay. Mr.
Catch.
Richard?
Well, I just think that we have professional planning and engineering people that reviews these things, and it's pretty clear what the ordinance says, so why condition something that's already in our code? It just doesn't make sense to me.
Okay. Any additional questions for staff? Okay. If there's no further questions, we'd like to call the case.
RZ 1920, James H. Nutt III of Marietta, Georgia, requests a rezoning from RA Residential Agricultural to R3 Single Family Residence for property located on the north side of Hampton Locust Grove Road to the north of Brindley Way in land lots 209 and 210 of the 2nd District. The property consists of 41.268 plus or minus acres, and the request is for a single-family residential subdivision. This is District 2, and the report was presented by Mrs. Yuritsa Nieves, Planner 2.
Okay. We've heard the case. Do we have a motion?
I do, if you'll bear with me, because we're going to put some conditions on here. So I would ask for a little help. And Steve, is it okay for me to ask Steve to come up so I'm clear on the conditions that I'm going to put? Yeah.
That's fine.
Okay, Steve, if you would, because I want to make sure I get it right. So I would make a motion that we accept staff recommendation to approve this request with the four conditions, eliminating condition number 5, to start there. So approval with the 4 staff recommendations on the 4 conditions, elimination of condition number 5 regarding the retention pond, and then, and I'm not sure how to do this, but regarding the buffers, I know we had talked about that, 40 foot as opposed to 30 on the north and east side. So I would ask that would be a condition added as well, that we extend that to a 40-foot buffer as opposed to 30-foot. And then regarding the fence, that was something you were going to do anyway, or do I need to condition that?
We hadn't specifically discussed the fence. We definitely discussed some landscaping, but since we have to fence the pond anyway, it's not that much farther, and if that's what, I think if that's what keeps everyone happy,
Okay.
an opaque fence, and if we could just maybe not specify wooden, because I think that may not be what the residents want next door, and it may just be something that provides that visual barrier, and it may be a combination of fencing and landscaping.
Okay.
But some fence intended to provide some visual screening between the two neighborhoods, I think would be appropriate.
Okay, so fencing, a
And
combination of fencing and landscaping between the two communities
along the western property.
on the western side. That would be an additional condition. And then, I know we had a discussion about the berm on Hampton Locust Grove Road. Again, is that something, that's aesthetics? You were gonna do something there anyway?
Yes, ma'am. The
Okay.
only debate is just where it goes, but I guess if we just leave it open to along Hampton Locust Grove Road, along the frontage, because it's
Right.
It's one
But
way
you were gonna
today
do
and it
that
may be
any-
another
I'm
way.
trying to figure out what because this is, if we
I
look
think-
up micromanage in the dictionary, this case might pop right up in our face. Because
Right.
we're doing a fine job of micromanaging this, but, so I'm not sure if I trust that that's
So
gonna happen.
we already have a landscape buffer proposed.
Right,
And so I think that, we would be okay with the buffer along Hampton Locust Grove Road will consist of, a landscape berm and plantings. I don't know what else
period.
you want to say.
Buffer
but-
along Hampton Locust Grove will consist of some sort of landscaping, plantings.
Yes, ma'am.
As feasible. So we say that. As far as the utilities, again, that's a little bit of micromanaging. You can call and find out when they're gonna be digging. I'm not gonna deal with that. I don't think, did I leave anything out? We just eliminate the retention pond and then it's out of our hair.
Well, Ms. King, I'd like for
Yes.
you to go back and actually read that motion and give us an exact motion of what you would like.
Okay. Did someone write that down over there to help me out?
I-
So,
You did.
oh, yeah. Okay, so a motion to approve staff recommendation to approve this request with 4 conditions, eliminating condition number 5 regarding the retention pond. We're making a condition regarding, and can you help me out, Stacy? Did you write all that down?
The 40-foot buffer on the
Yes.
north and eastern property line?
Well,
Correct.
It's already required on the north.
East and south.
I've got north and east.
And Ms. King, you stated east, but if this is on the Wycliffe side, it should be the west side.
Okay.
Okay.
There's a buffer that's required already on the east and the north sides
Okay.
that are on the site plan is 40 feet. The applicant had proposed a 30-foot buffer on that western side where it backs up to Wycliffe, and there was a discussion about bumping that one up to 40 feet as well, and that's on the west side. And then the southern side is the frontage along Hampton Locust Grove Road.
Okay. So the 40-foot buffer needs to go where?
On the west.
On the west.
On the west. All right, so approval with condition to add or extend the buffer from 30 to 40 feet on the west side.
Okay, are we ready for, I
That
need a
wasn't-
clear motion, one clear motion. without
Right, I
interruption.
understand, well, I'm trying to get there. Well, okay, so if I make a motion to approve, staff recommendation to approve this, with all of the conditions from staff and from myself, but eliminating condition number 5 from staff, will that get it done?
And Yuritsa, do you have the notes?
With the video, I think we can.
And Ms. King, my notes, and correct me if I'm wrong,
Okay.
staff recommended conditions 1 through 4.
Correct.
There'd be an additional condition requiring a minimum 40-foot buffer on the west side of the subject property. An additional condition requiring a combination of fencing and landscaping on the west side of the subject
Correct.
property. And an additional condition requiring a buffer along Hampton Locust Grove Road, which shall consist of a berm and landscaping.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. We have a motion. Do I have a second? I'll second. I have a second. All in favor? I'm sorry, discussion. Let's just with the discussion.
Well, I would like for the condition 5 to stay in, since stormwater is the subject matter experts on this, and then they can take it before the Board of Commissioners with the additional information by staff to see if it could be taken away at that point.
Okay. Any additional discussion?
Well, here again, it's already in our code. Let's let the engineering people who enforce these things deal with it. I mean, why go beyond something that's in our code?
Okay.
I'm good with that. I leave it to eliminate it. I don't have a problem with that.
Okay.
I don't think that's gonna be an issue.
Well, the applicant indicated that the code does not require the pond to be on one lot. And to eliminate that condition, actually change what the staff is recommending. And furthermore, if the applicant is saying that he essentially is in compliance or will be in compliance with that condition, why take it out? That's my feeling.
All right, we have a motion. And we have a, do we have a second based on the motion?
You have a second.
Okay. All in favor? 2, 3, 4. Motion carries.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay. Call the next case, please.
AM 1912 JWA Ventures 2 LLC of Montgomery, Alabama requests an amendment to the comprehensive plan for property located at 109 Old Kellytown Road and in land lots 58 and 71 of the 11th District. The property consists of 22.31 plus or minus acres, and the request is to amend the future land use map designation from rural residential to mixed use. District 4, and the report is presented by Kent Lanham, Planner 1, and Stacy Jordan, Chief Planner.
Good evening, Chair and Board members.
Good evening.
The request before you is for an amendment to the future land use map designation for property located at 109 Old Kellytown Road, as highlighted on the aerial map in your exhibit books, as well as on the overhead projection. This property is at the intersection of Highway 155 North and Kellytown Road. The request is to amend the future land use map from a commercial and rural residential designation to mixed use. This request is to support a concurrent rezoning case that is to be heard following this case. The future land use map designation for this property, as I mentioned before, is rural residential, which allows for up to 1 dwelling unit per net acre. The northwest corner of the property, approximately 5.0 plus or minus acres, is designated as commercial. Any development on the subject property would have to comply with the standards of the Highway Corridor Overlay District, creating pedestrian facilities where there previously were none, and assist in encouraging connectivity in this area. A letter from the Henry County Water Authority dated September 19th, 2019, states that sewer is available to the subject property at the expense of the developer/owner. The use of the subject property for mixed use is appropriate due to the subject property being uniquely situated along Highway 155 North and Kellytown Road, a major and minor arterial road, respectively. Staff has evaluated the request and several aspects of the site, including but not limited to the surrounding properties and future land use designations of commercial and rural residential, the availability to sewer, and the street classifications. Given the aforementioned characteristics of the property, in addition to the future land use designation once more as commercial and rural residential, this creates a reasonable basis for granting the future land use map designation request. With this, staff recommends approval for the request to amend the future land use map designation from commercial and rural residential to mixed use. Thank you, and I would be happy to answer any questions you may have.
Thank you. Does the board have questions for the staff? Mr. Carmack?
Is the applicant's current plans to develop the commercial parts of this plan beyond the current 5 acres that are already designated as commercial?
Yes, that is correct. I believe the applicant is looking to develop 12 acres, plus or minus acres, for the first phase of development for a grocery store, anchored shopping center, and out parcel.
Any additional questions, Mr. Carmack? No. Okay, Mr. Richard.
Yes, I have a question about the zoning history. I think in your report it says that on July 18th of 2017 that the Board of Commissioners approved a comprehensive plan amendment to designate the subject property from residential to commercial. Now, did that include all of the 22 acres, or was it just a 5-acre tract?
It was just that northwest corner, 5.0 plus or minus acres.
Okay, so it's recommended on the amended land use plan, but it also says that there was a zoning application that was presented to the ZAB, our board, on May the 11th, but then this was withdrawn prior to being heard at the at a Board of Commissioners meeting. So is this, was the 5 acres, was that recommended by this board? And then it went on to the commissioners and then was dropped, or?
I believe, and I may be mistaken about this, but I believe the Zoning Advisory Board at that time recommended approval for that
Okay.
change in the future land use map.
Okay, so the entire 22 acres is still residential agricultural. There's no part of it that's zoned commercial yet. Is that correct?
That is correct.
Okay. And in this request, we're asking for approximately 12 acres of commercial. Is that correct?
12.75 plus or minus,
Okay.
yes.
And Mr. Risher, if I could add to what Kent is saying, the request is to go from the commercial on our future land use map, which covers approximately 5 acres, and the rural residential on the balance of this 22 acres to entirely be designated for mixed use
Right.
on our future land use map.
Okay,
And-
right, but according to the site plan, approximately 12.7 acres within the mixed-use development would possibly be a commercial development.
Yes, sir, that's correct.
All right.
Any additional questions for staff? Okay, if not, we'd like to call the applicant forward, please. Please state your name and address for the record.
Good evening. My name's Andy Welch. I'm at 2200 Keys Ferry Court in McDonough, Georgia. I'm here to present on behalf of JWA Ventures. The request for you is tonight on this particular issue, just a comp plan amendment from the current low-density residential agricultural to a mixed-use designation for the comp plan. The staff has gone over the terms of the request and recommended approval, and we would ask for your favorable consideration as to that request. And then I'd be happy to take any questions. I know we have 2 steps in the process, so I know we have the zoning part of this as well. As the staff has pointed out, and I'll just reemphasize these important points, this particular land is located in a triangular piece of property surrounded by roads on every side. Its utility is very limited in terms of being used for a residential, low-density residential component. It is located along, of course, I-155, State Route 155 corridor, and is in a perfect location given that particular intersection and the improvements that GDOT has made to that intersection in rerouting Old Kellytown Road to this particular location. One thing that was brought up, I think Mr. Risher was bringing up some questions before, and I'll go ahead and try to answer those. Historically, this property back in 17, an applicant came forward before you. I was representing that applicant, the property owners, in a request for the rezoning of the corner to a commercial establishment. That was approved in terms of the amendment to the future land use map. However, the rezoning was pulled because at the time the applicant was requesting a gas station facility convenience store. You remember that was staunchly opposed by folks in the community for another gas station at that particular location. And so when we understood that was the wishes of the community, that was the only intended party for that particular property was a potential gas station convenience store. We withdrew the application, leaving it as a commercial designation. And now we have a different applicant, a grocer who is interested in that property, the bulk of the property that you see on the site plan. But I'll get into those details when we get to the zoning question.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Welch. Any questions for the applicant? Okay, if there's no questions, thank you.
Thank you.
Maybe see, we'd like to allot 10 minutes for anyone wishing to speak in favor of this case. 10 minutes for anyone wishing to speak in favor. Okay, if no one's coming forward, I'd like to allot 10 minutes for anyone wishing to speak in opposition. Are you speaking in favor, sir? Okay.
My name is Robert Kolpak, 272 Cotton Indian Creek Road, McDonough, Georgia, 30252. I'm about a mile from the property. In 2017, the property was known as basically real residential, and it's a nice idea to have a grocery store in our area. And I would welcome the developer, because it's probably a little cheaper where he's looking at right now, to give him an idea that maybe at East Lake Parkway and 155, there's 22.78 acres available. It's going for $4 million next to Walgreens. Probably be a better spot for a grocery store instead of disturbing a residential property. In the future land use map, why do we have it if we're going to just rezone? That should be a future land use map. So I'm in favor of the grocery store, just not in favor of the location and disturbing all the houses that are in the area of Kellytown and 155. There's better places for this. It might cost the developer a little more money, but with a 100-year-old house there and stuff, I think we need to preserve it. So thank you.
Okay. This time is going to be allotted for anyone wishing to speak in favor of this particular case, this lot, and this location. Anyone wishing to speak in favor of the case?
Good evening, Chairman and Zoning Advisory Board. Clayton Cart, Locust Grove. As we've heard from the applicant, Mr. Welch, and staff, this property has about 5 acres set aside for commercial as it is now. 5 acres will support roughly a gas station, maybe a small box discount store, and as we've heard from residents throughout Henry County, both in 2017 and continuously now, additional gas stations and small box discount stores are unfavorable. I support this request because if amended, it would allow a grocery size anchored commercial development along with a couple acres that we need to discuss with the applicant, but based on its location along a major state route and the applicable conditions from the Highway Corridor Overlay District, their plans will be of high quality, and I know it's mentioned about the intersection improvements. It's worth noting that Georgia DOT first identified this intersection for improvements in 1999. So you may hear that, I doubt that GDOT was thinking of commercial 20 years ago. I think it was a safety issue. And while it took them 15 years to build it, it's been a much welcome safety improvement since then. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay. We have additional time left. Anyone wishing to speak in favor of this case? Okay. At this point, we'd like to allot 10 minutes for anyone wishing to speak in opposition. Please come forward, state your name and address for the record. We have a total of 10 minutes, so I'm not sure how many people are speaking, but we want to kind of limit it to that 10 minutes.
Okay, my name is Davies Brown. And the residents over there in that area, we were notified Monday of the change in what plans they had for this particular corner. The people that was in that meeting, we don't want commercial, we don't want stores. We already have enough problems. We have people now going into trying to get into parked cars. We've had a drive-by shooting over there. It was said that they was going to build a senior facility over there. Okay, if you're going to build a senior facility, you want to do commercial, why don't you build a medical center that help the seniors out and the residents in the area, and the library over there. You have 4 schools, and then children can go to the libraries. We are opposed of having a grocery store and restaurants. We were not informed of the gas station, but we are opposed of that.
Hi, I'm Kylie Hare, and I live at 676 Kibbe Road, McDonough, Georgia. Since there is obviously the grocery store we talk about later, I'll just stay true to that land use map right now. So I think that's important when we're thinking about rezoning this and considering mixed use in the future. Right now, there is a church, an elementary school, another church, and 2 neighborhoods, Kibbe Road and Ashland Ridge. And both of those, they're sizable lots. And I think that any development to this property in the future, with it being zoned mixed use, I think that would damage the integrity of the community because people come here for the rural charm. They don't come here for a grocery store and an assisted living. And I think that when we think about changing the future land use for this property, we really open a Pandora's box for a lot more issues down the road. And I think that another good point that we need to think about is Old Kellytown Road even rated for semi-trucks? Because there are not 1, not 2, not 3, but 4 entrances and exits proposed for this development. But I'm sure I'll let some of my neighbors speak, but I urge you to oppose it.
Thank you.
Hey, I'm Jeremy Hagler, and I live at 679 Kibbe Road. And I wanted to give you some reasons why I think the property should stay residential. A little less than a month ago, I created a petition called Keep Kellytown Residential. And at the last check today, we had 188 signatures on that petition. Many of us who like living in Kellytown because of the residential agricultural layout. There's already 2 grocery stores within 4 miles of this property. And the proposed development is dependent on sewer access, and I know they said earlier that they had that sewer access, but I'm not sure that they do have that sewer access because they've been trying to get that access through mine and my parents' property for the last couple of years now, and we don't want to give them that access. And there's also several other people who couldn't make it to tonight's meeting who are in the same position that we are. And another thing is that the more development that takes place around us, the more runoff it's creating. We live on a creek, and that proposed sewer line would be running along the creek. And as the development has increased over the years, that creek has been more prone to flooding. And just recently, with the newest development on Kellytown Road, we've seen some of the worst flooding that we've seen since I've lived here, and I've lived here my whole life. So I guess in conclusion, I'm just trying to say that we might be getting a little ahead of ourselves if we zone this property commercial before we know for sure that we have sewer access. And I feel like the property should be left in its current zoning, and it would be best just to build houses on 1 acre lots that would not require sewer access. And the property that we're talking about right here is really a really nice property, and I think that you know, it would be suitable to build houses in. Thank you.
Good evening. My name is Mark Paxton, 855 Stone Glen Court, McDonough, Georgia. I live in Brook Hollow, which is just off this map. I do oppose having commercial there. My biggest concern, though, I would ask this board if you could help clear up some of the, I think, confusion on the sewer. I am another homeowner who has been approached since this past January to take an easement through my land, which we're very opposed to. I have been told by the company doing that it is for this development. I have stood in Henry County Water Authority with an employee there telling me they have approved that if the developer shows a negotiating good faith, which I don't know how $1,000 is considered good faith, that the county would be prepared to take me to court to take that land. In a meeting 2 nights ago, the developer stated they are not doing that. And then tonight it sounds like your staff has said that sewer is already available. And I don't understand that. Then why is my land trying to be taken to run sewer there if we're stating in this amendment sewer is available? Thank you.
Thank you.
Good evening. My name is Franklin Cochran, and I live at 304 Cronkite Drive, McDonough. I keep hearing things about the sewer, Do we have sewer that far up in Henry County? I live on Kellytown Road, like I say, in Cronkite in the Watkins Glen subdivision. Do we have sewer that far from down here up that way?
Stacy, you want to address?
You know, they was talking in the meeting that the sewer act, we have access to that, but then I've been there like since 2004. I haven't seen anything been working that way. And if there is a way to do the sewer, where's the treatment plant going to be placed at?
Well, sir, let me just say, this is not a question session for the board, but if this property is approved, it would have to meet the requirements of the county, which would require sewer. So that part of it would have to be satisfied by the applicant at the time.
Well, see, that wasn't stated like that the other night at the meeting. I was there at that meeting. But I'm not for the gas stations and stuff, so I'm opposed of that. We're gonna have to come up with another good plan to do that area there, because we have nice homes up in that area, and we want to keep the value. Thank you so much.
Thank you. All right. We have about 3 minutes for anyone wishing to speak in opposition of this case.
I'm Rosemary Howard. I live at 751 Keeby Road, which is at the very bottom of Keeby Road. And speaking about this sewer, we have been approached for a couple of years now. 2018, we received a letter saying that if we didn't come to an agreement with the land development by the end of that year, that they would start condemnation of our property. They want to come all the way across our property. Initially, they wanted to go right in front of our front porch. And like they were saying, they were only offering $1,000 to do this. They've come back and they're surveying different ways to do this. But I really, really pray that if you do approve this, that you will stipulate that they can find another way. There may be another way that costs them more money, but that it could preserve our way of life where we live, where we don't have to worry about the creek flooding and stopping up some sewer line and having some kind of disgusting filth on our property. Also, I think it's very misleading the way that they're saying what they're going to do here whenever they're not mentioning that they're going to put 22 townhomes up there too. They just want to put everything in this very small space, and we are trapped down at the end of the road there. We're not even going to be able to get out of our road. I understand that people need homes, people need businesses, but not every single one of these things needs to be at the very top of our street. It doesn't mesh. The people on our road have an average of 7 acres per home. And the Ashland Ridge has at least an acre per home. And now all of a sudden, they're bringing this in that does not go along with our community at all. So I please hope that you will take your citizens' request and keep our homes for us. Thank you.
Good evening, Board. Thank you. My concern, Tom Kilfoyle, 603 Kibbe Road. My concern is the amount of traffic on Old Kellytown Road. There are currently 43 houses on Kibbe Road, 13 houses on Ashland Ridge, 56 homes using Old Kellytown Road at the moment, not including when the church uses it. And the property across the street from this development on the east side of Old Kellytown Road, there's a lot of acreage there that will be developed in the future. And my concern is the amount of traffic that will be generated, whether this stays commercial, multi-use, or stays RA. You're looking at a huge increase in the number of vehicles using that dead-end access road. The only in and out is onto the new section of Kellytown Road. So it's something that has to be considered. Multi-use opens it up, as she said, to townhomes or anything else. It's not specific what the remaining 11-plus acres would be used for in the proposal that's out there for the 12.7 going commercial now. We don't know what the remaining 11 acres would be. Thank you for your time.
Thank you. Okay, that concludes that session. At this point, does the board have additional questions for the applicant or staff? Okay, Mr. Carmichael.
Under the current zoning, that 5-acre plot of land on the northwest corner, could a grocery store currently be built there?
The entire property?
No, just let's talk about the 5 acres that is currently zoned commercial.
That 5 acres is not currently zoned commercial. That is just the future land use designation. It is currently zoned, as with the rest of the property, RA, residential agricultural.
Okay, that's what I don't understand.
Mr. Chair, did you want me to address sewer?
Yes, go ahead and address that while you
Okay. So, just like we're not experts on stormwater, we're also not experts on water and sewer. And what Kenta has shown on our overhead is the letter that we have received from our Henry County Water Authority. And we have to rely on the information that they give us. And we put a lot of value in this, and we require these letters to make a completed application. What they have said is that sewage treatment and sewer line capacity are presently available to the property. However, an off-site sanitary sewer line extension is required, and that's to be at the developer's expense. And the off-site sewer line extension may require the acquisition of easements, and they specified at the developer's expense. So they didn't mention using their powers of condemnation to take these easements. Now, I imagine that if they choose to do that, they have the power to do that, but they didn't tell us that.
Thank you so much.
Yes, sir.
Stacy. All right. I have a question for the applicant. Will you come forward, please? Mr. Welch, as you see, there's a lot of concerns about sewage. Have you guys addressed that at all, or where are you with that?
Well, two things. One, I don't represent the property owners. We're representing the developer, which is JWA Ventures. We're not engaged in the sewer process at all. The property owners have to secure those sewer rights, and they have to secure them through and bring them up to the site. That would be required for any zoning on the property, whether it be commercial or the mixed-use development. So that's not within my scope of activities.
All right, thank you. Any additional questions?
I do, kind of dovetailing off of that. So the property owner then is offering the $1,000 for the easement access?
You'd have to ask the property owners. I don't know.
I understand.
I think that's what the citizens are telling
Yeah,
us. So.
thank you, yeah.
I guess, again, I'm still confused. And on July 18th, 2017, the Board of Commissioners approved an associated comprehensive plan amendment to amend the flume designation of the subject property from residential to commercial. And again, we're talking about the 5 acres on the northwest corner. If that has already been designated to be commercial, again, my question was, could a grocery store be built on those 5 acres?
If I could, Mr. Carmichael, that's a good question, and the answer to the question is not this grocery store. Certainly a smaller Dollar General type of store could go there and fit within that parameters of spacing. That is not my understanding of what the community wants. This is a grocer that is a national, or it's definitely a southeastern grocer. This board actually recently heard a zoning application from the same grocer, or at least the developers, for that same grocer about a year ago, and that was recommended for approval, and Ola was the location of that grocer. But this grocer is larger than your Family Dollar, Dollar General type of, and it's not that kind of retailer, so that it wouldn't fit on the 5 acres that's designated, which is part of the reason why we're asking for the full rezoning of the property to accommodate that facility.
Another question I have, if you can put the site plan back up there again, where you propose to put most of the commercial activity, including the grocery store, would that be the southwest corner of that property?
Yes, this being north here, so this would be the southeastern, and this would be the southwestern. Oh, sorry, southeastern. Southeast right here. Southeast here, southwestern. Well, wait a minute. Are you talking about the intersection or the? Because this is the body of the property is here, so the northern part of the property would be used for the grocery store and commercial elements.
Mr. Carmichael, it's a little hard to understand because because of the shape of the property, the north is to the left side. So that makes it a little interesting to look at.
So if you have it like this, Mr. Carmichael, there we go. If you put the north symbol this way,
okay,
you'll see that this intersection runs this way. So the northern part of the property is here. The store would be facing west. The rear of the store will be facing east. This is the southern portion of the property here. So when they say in the staff report, the northwest corner, they're speaking of this area here has been designated for the 5-acre designation of commercial.
Okay, Mr. Richard.
Yes, I see the proposed commercial development, but also on your site plan, there's several out parcels that are mentioned, and I realize what's coming up next is an application for a mixed-use zoning, but so therefore, what are the other components of land use that would make up this mixed-use development? We've heard different things, and I'm not sure exactly what is going to happen.
Yes, sir. It's a good question. We originally proposed, and that's why staff's report's written the way it is with their conditions, but we had originally proposed that the balance of the property, which would have been this area south, was going to be a residential subdivision, possibly a R2 subdivision on sewer. That was the proposal, but that was before GDOT, the meetings with GDOT, whereby they actually asked us to relocate the entrance. The original plan had the entrance coming out alongside this corridor parking. For spacing purposes, GDOT told us that we'd have to move that entrance here, which then created this arm that cut right through the area that we would have been developing for a subdivision. In light of that, we had to change our trajectory on that. And in discussions with staff and with the commissioner, it was actually discussed that some senior facilities would be appropriate for the property. So we kept it as mixed use because it provides that ability to do a senior assisted living facility. And the balance of this property is where that would be located. It's almost 7 acres, which is really not that much given it's cut with this road. In addition to that, this 2-acre piece would probably be used for commercial use. It could be for some medical facilities, but the 2-acre, it looks large on that property, on that layout, but it's actually not large given its size. A Chick-fil-A these days uses about 2 acres, probably could use 3 to 4, but that would be a comparable size for most of your standalone restaurants.
Well, and I guess one other question, and this may be more appropriate with the zoning application that we'll hear, but in terms of truck traffic that would service this large store, what would the internal circulation pattern B, and would that traffic exit southbound on Old Kelly Town Road towards the Angle intersection, or would it exit, I guess, would it exit at all on Old Kelly Town Road?
No, no, it would not. It's not, the engineering of this is that the vehicles will come back through this area and come around here to come back out to the light. The interaction with Old Kelly Town Road would not be beneficial
Right,
for those, so.
So there would be no commercial truck traffic, semi-trailers on Old Kelly Town Road, as far as we know.
I don't think that road is even classified for truck traffic. It's effectively a dead-end road. And just so you were aware that the entire, this area here is the Victory Tabernacle Church here, located all the way to this point here. So in terms of alignment, this is aligning up with a, not a commercial use, but an institutional use across the street, across what is now New Kellytown Road. And of course, you know, diagonal from this site is the elementary school that's there, and then just down the road is the Christmas Tree Farm. So you have commercial activity in this area already that draws in traffic for use of these facilities in this area. We think this is conducive for that. The balance of the property we anticipate we'll be using for senior or medical facilities for that community. That has been the request by both community members and people that we've talked with in that area, as well as our discussions with the commissioner.
How many jobs do you anticipate this commercial activity will produce?
About 200 jobs we anticipate, and that's not counting for what medical or assisted living facilities might be brought into the area.
This is for staff. In reading the sewer letter there, what's the date of that letter?
Yes, the date of that sewer letter is September 19th, 2019.
Okay, all right. And then there was a mention when the DOT moved the location of the road to a lower location, and the designation that they wanted to, from a subdivision to senior homes. Does that change anything that's in that letter as to what could actually be constructed there?
Mr. Brown, I would not expect that GDOT's requirement for driveway spacing would affect the availability of sewer. No, sir.
No, but it's not GDOT, but it's the water authority. What they're saying is the number of homes, I believe, that could be built in that area based on the PSI that they have there for residential static.
And what I would expect is that because of the driveway spacing, requiring a driveway to go through what would have been a subdivision and necessitating the removal of certain lots, that there would be less of an impact on the sewer service with a reduced number of lots.
But it says in a deviation in the zoning.
It's likely that what the Water and Sewerage Authority is saying is that this letter is for something specific, and if they ask for anything else or an increase in the proposal, that they would reserve the right to reevaluate this. And even if they don't, this letter doesn't serve to reserve service.
Okay, thank you.
Any additional questions for the applicant? Mr. Moore.
Mr. Stacey, I need some clarification. I'm confused on something. The portion of the sewer that was described earlier that was to be the responsibility of the end user, is that the developer or the landowner that's responsible for that extension of the needed pipe?
If the owner was the developer, they would be responsible for it. Otherwise, whoever the developer is, according to the letter, at their own expense, they would have to acquire these easements and to extend this sewer line.
I understand. And there's been several mentions tonight by the public about letters they received that was an attempt to purchase with what come across as a threat of lawsuit or condemnation if not agreeable. Who would have authored that letter? Would that have been the county? Would that have been the landowner? Would that have been the developer? Who would have sent out a letter like that?
Mr. Moore, I would only be able to speculate, and I just don't want to do that. I haven't myself seen these letters, and I have to say I don't know.
Okay. So, but at this point, the sewer service is there, but it would need extra development of pipe and installation in the ground for it to be a complete system. I assume it's to take it from the collection point to the treatment point. Is that correct?
Yes, sir.
And there was a question tonight about where that would be treated. Do you know where that would be treated?
If it's not in this letter, I don't know.
Okay.
But the letter does say that sewage treatment capacity is available.
Capacity. Okay. And is the capacity that they're speaking of good enough for it to pass the zoning conditions?
Yes, sir. I know that you can't see the top part of this letter, but the applicant's proposal is summarized. And so so it's a mixed-use zoning, and the Water and Sewage Authority is very diligent about understanding a request. And so with a clear understanding, the Water Authority has issued this letter stating that both water and sewer service is available.
Okay. Okay. I'm struggling with the portion of the eminent domain condemnation concern that people have. That at that level, that's where I struggle with whether or not jobs are good or whether keeping it residential is good. So, Mr. Welch, may I ask you, the client that you represent, has your client, I think earlier, if I remember correctly, you said that your client had not taken on that portion of it yet and that we'd have to talk with the landowner about any letters that went out. So that's
correct. The arrangement is that obviously any development of this property is going to be subject to having sewer, at least for the mixed use development. So the arrangement is that sewer has to obviously be there on the site for the development to move forward. That's going to be required by your own development ordinances. If it's not there, then land disturbance permits for a mixed-use development would not be forthcoming. So we're not affiliated with the
acquisition of any right-of-ways. So your client hasn't participated in that action at this point. So that would either be a county letter or a landowner letter. I'm trying to do my homework on this because there's some people very upset about that letter. And I think we owe it to them to find out more about that.
Well, the sewer, the utility installation is a utility matter, and so JWA Ventures has asked me to come to you and to the staff to seek rezoning of the property.
Yes, sir.
So obviously, if that is the wishes of this body and the Board of Commissioners to give it a designation of mixed use for development, ultimately it's always going to fall back on, can a development permit actually be issued? And so if it cannot because the sewer's not there, then that's the end of it until sewer is available and on the site and on the property, because the sewage is available, the treatment capacity is available. But I think you're right, there's a main trunk line that runs down a creek below here, and the issue is whether or not those landowners can bring that line up to their property.
And they would need the consent of their neighbors to do that.
They would need to purchase easements, yes. Or reroute it, yes, right.
Okay, thank you. I'm still sorting it out, but thank you.
Any additional questions for staff or the applicant? Okay, if not, thank you. Call the case, please.
COMP AM 1912 JWA Ventures II LLC of Montgomery, Alabama requests an amendment to the comprehensive plan for property located at 109 Old Kellytown Road in land lots 58 and 71 of the 11th District. The property consists of 22.31 plus or minus acres, and the request is to amend the future land use map designation from rural residential to mixed use. District 4, and the report is presented by Kent Lanham, Planner 1, and Stacy Jordan, Chief Planner.
Okay, we've heard the case. Do we have a motion?
Mr. Chairman, I'd like to make a motion on COMP-AM-19-12. I feel that we should agree with staff recommendation to approve this request.
We have a motion to approve. Do we have a second?
I second.
Okay, any discussion? All in favor? I'm sorry, hold on. Mr. Rich?
Yes, I guess just to clarify that what the request is to amend the comprehensive plan to allow this to be a mixed-use development, but we're not necessarily showing any zoning boundaries by that, are we?
So, Mr. Risher, the request is to change the future land use map designation from commercial for that spot of 5 acres and the balanced rural residential to the entire 22 acres being a mixed-use land use designation on that future land use map of the comprehensive plan. And so the zoning would remain RA until the Board of Commissioners takes action on a rezoning to go from RA to mixed use. And we'll have that hearing next for your recommendation on that rezoning. But this just serves the purpose of changing our policy guide.
Thank you.
Yes, sir.
Okay. We have a motion. Do we have a second?
I second.
And we have a second. All in favor? 1, 2, 3. You give me a vote again. All in favor of the case? 1, 2, 3, 4. All opposed? Motion carries.
Thank you.
All right, call the next case, please.
RC 1921 JWA Ventures II LLC of Montgomery, Alabama requests a rezoning from RA Residential Agricultural to MU Mixed Use for property located at 109 Old Kellytown Road in land lots 51 and 71 of the 11th District. The property consists of 22.31 plus or minus acres, and the request is for a mixed-use development consisting of a grocery and anchored shopping center, ancillary shops, and our parcels. District 4, and the report is presented by Kent Lanham, Planner 1, and Stacy Jordan, Chief Planner.
Good evening once more, Chair and board members.
Good evening.
The rezoning request in front of you is for a property located once more at 109 Old Kellytown Road, as highlighted on the aerial map in your exhibit books, as well as on the overhead projection. The property is at the intersection of Highway 155 North and Kellytown Road. The property is currently zoned RA, Residential Agricultural, and the future land use map designation is Rural Residential, which allows for up to 1 dwelling unit per net acre, as well as the northwest corner of the property, approximately 5.0 plus or minus acres, as commercial. And once more, the board recommended approval for the future land use map designation for mixed use. Here is the site plan submitted. Once more, by the applicant as dated November 5th, 2019. This site plan is also shown in your exhibit books as well as on the overhead projection. As shown, the development will consist of a grocery store anchored commercial area, on the 12.75 plus or minus acres for the first phase of development. The intended land use for the second phase of development on the remaining 9.56 plus or minus acres has yet to be officially specified. However, the applicant submitted a Board of Education letter dated October 24th, 2019. In this letter, 25 dwelling units were proposed, indicating a residential component of the development. We have since heard at this meeting, as well as I believe the community meeting on Monday, that an assisted living facility is proposed, or at least there's discussion of an assisted living facility for that remaining 9.56 plus or minus acres. The subject property is once more within the Highway Corridor Overlay District and will be required to comply with those development standards. Likewise, the property would be required to comply with the mixed-use development standards. Staff has evaluated the request and the several characteristics of the property, including but not limited to the future land use designations of the site and those surrounding, the availability of sewer and street classifications. Staff recommends approval for the rezoning request and the conditions shown in your exhibit books. As well as on the overhead projector. Please note of the alteration to condition 4 and the 2 additional conditions shown in red. Thank you, and I would be happy to answer any questions that you may have.
Okay. Mr. Carmichael. One question I have, does the proposed assisting living facility replace the proposal to have 25 dwellings on that property?
Yes, I believe so, but I believe the applicant would also be able to provide more clarification on that matter.
Okay.
And Mr. Carmichael, we amended our recommendation in such a manner that they could do either one.
Okay. I think that was my question. I think he had that option, but the question is, and I don't have it before me, do we have a school letter within the...
We do, and that's how we got the idea that the applicant was proposing 25 lots, because the school board letter indicated that they had proposed that to the school board. I'm not exactly sure that these 25 lots would fit, especially as the applicant had stated in the previous hearing, the realigned drive would cut through the middle of this subdivision. But we wrote our condition in such a fashion that you could have single family in that phase 2 or assisted living, as we've amended our recommendation.
Gotcha. Any additional questions?
Stacy, could you point out for me, under your recommendations, which one of these items cover that matter?
Yes, sir. So we're looking at condition number 4, and at the time that this staff report was written, we didn't know that GDOT's requirement to realign this entrance was going to affect the development of phase 2 for single family, and hence they began considering assisted living. So we're having to amend our recommendation for condition 4. But what it states is that permitted commercial uses shall be limited to the C2 zoning district. Any single-family lots shall be limited to R2 sewer with a minimum 22,000 square feet. Any other use besides conservation, open space, and assisted living shall be prohibited. And so that additional allowance for assisted living is part of our amendment to our recommendation, and that is on the overhead projection.
Any additional questions? Okay.
Last week, we heard and approved a proposal for an assisted senior living community in another part of the county, but they had to apply for a conditional use permit. Would that not also be applicable in this situation?
Mr. Richard, that is not applicable in the mixed-use zoning district. That case that we heard last week, I believe it was for a piece of property that remains zoned RA. And so in that instance, they certainly would be required to have an approved conditional use. But if this property is zoned mixed use, assisted living is a permitted use in that mixed use zoning district.
Mr. Carmichael. Okay, in the event an assisted living facility was constructed there, would that impact the number of single-family homes we would allow?
It's likely. The applicant, there's enough room, Mr. Carmichael, I believe, to have both if they so chose. In our Unified Land Development Code, the minimum area for assisted living is 2 acres. This area for Phase 2A is about 2 acres. If they chose to have a mixture of single family and assisted living, perhaps they could fit the assisted living on the 2 acres of Phase 2A and then have single family on Phase 2B. Or the way this condition is amended, they could have assisted living on both Phase 2A and Phase 2B. Or conceivably, they could have single family lots in Phase 2A. It allows for the flexibility for the developer to have both if they chose, or either or.
Let me ask the question another way.
Yes, sir.
What was your reasoning in limiting the number of dwellings to 25?
The reason that we conditioned or recommended a condition to limit the number of lots to 25 is that the applicant indicated to the school board that the projected number of dwelling units would be 25. And so that fits with the density limitation for this mixed use. But we wanted to recommend a condition that wouldn't allow any more than that. But in this configuration, I'm not sure they could even fit 25 single-family homes.
Stacey, I have a question, and I'm kind of confused now.
Yes, sir.
What amendment are you showing that allows them to do assisted living?
Yes, sir. So on the overhead projection in red, it shows our amendments. At the town hall meeting on Monday night, it was indicated to us by the applicant's representative that they were considering assisted living. The staff report was already written, and so if we're to recommend that the applicant have that ability, we knew that we needed to amend our recommendation. So for condition number 4, we added the allowance for assisted living. And so we wanted to make sure that was a part of our presentation for you tonight. And if you agree that the applicant should be allowed to have assisted living, then it would need to be a part of a motion for approval that we would go with the amended staff recommendation.
Because you're saying in your letter, the assisted living shall be prohibited.
Well, we didn't even mention that. We just said any other use besides conservation and open space would be prohibited.
Okay, I'm reading here in red, any other use besides conservation, open space, and assisted living facilities
Any other use would be prohibited.
shall be prohibited.
Right, so the key word there is besides.
Okay, besides
Yes,
conversation, I got you, okay, now, yeah,
Any other use would be prohibited besides those.
okay, got you. Mr. Richard?
And you said that this was brought up for the first time at a community meeting this past week, or earlier this week?
Mr. Risher, I can only speak for myself. That was the first time that I had heard about the assisted living. And staff recommends approval of that. We think that would be a great thing for the applicant to have that ability.
Well, it certainly would be less impact on the schools.
Yes, sir.
So the staff recommends approval of that opposed to the 25 dwellings.
Well, we don't have an objection to the 25 dwellings, even though I doubt they could make 25 single-family lots fit. And the way these conditions are written, they could certainly have their 25, up to 25 dwelling units if somehow they're able to make it fit.
Okay. And Mr. Richard?
I thought it was that you all had recommended for the residential component, if that happens, the R2S, which would be 22,000 square feet on sanitary sewer, and I think that's 115-foot lot width, so that would be very few lots that could fit on this property.
Yes, sir, that is correct.
Question for you, Stacy. Is it normal that the board would approve this type of rezoning request without the actual uses of this land be pinned down more? I mean, because, again, for example, he's saying that he would possibly put an assisted living facility there. What does that mean?
Yes, sir. We, as staff, require a pre-application meeting before an applicant makes application. And at that pre-application meeting, it was indicated that this phase 2 was going to be proposed to be a residential phase. So we were expecting that. And then when we received a copy of the letter from the Board of Education indicating 25 lots, that seemed consistent. So we crafted our recommendation for approval of that based upon that. And then as this request has gone through the process of the applicant having conversation with GDOT and things changing and so forth, and in the process of staff receiving additional understanding of the applicant's request through our town hall meeting, the conditions have had to be amended. And so we've accomplished that and presented that before you tonight.
But what was it last week when we approved an assisted living facility for another area, as Mr. Richard indicated? We at least knew at that point in time as to whether, as to the number of possible patients, clients that that facility would serve. We also stipulated that the facility could not be used as a drug or mental rehabilitation center. And until, the applicant, I guess, would be able to query him on some of these. But until some of these facts are nailed down as to really what's going to happen out there, I guess I feel uncomfortable voting on this thing.
Mr. Carmichael, I think it would be very appropriate to ask the applicant for that information that you need regarding this assisted living. And I think that it's an excellent idea to put a condition on there, should this board want to approve it, that the assisted living would not be used for the on-site treatment of drug and alcohol dependency, certainly.
Mr. Richard.
Yes, getting back to my earlier concern about the truck traffic and circulation, which would be generated by a commercial component that we discussed earlier, I would like to see that added as a condition among all these others, that there be a traffic study, and we do recommend that on many other types of applications, with particular emphasis on truck traffic and its impacts.
Yes, sir.
Any additional questions? Yes, Mr.
With the part that
could be residential. Could that also be commercial if it's been rezoned to mixed use?
Well, our first condition states that for commercial elements of the proposed development, the subject property shall be developed with in substantial compliance of the land use designations of the conceptual plan dated November 5th, 2019. And if I could look at the site plan just for a moment, the commercial component is the 12 acres with the out parcel. Phase 2A doesn't specify. So I'm not convinced that Phase 2A, that this recommended condition would allow for Phase 2A to actually be used for commercial.
Any additional questions? Okay, if not, we'd like the applicant to come forward, please. Again, please state your name and address for the record.
Yes, Mr. Chairman. Andy Welch, 2200 Keats Ferry Court, McDonough, Georgia. Let me go right back to the issue about the assisted living, because that got a lot of discussion. And Stacy, I don't think he was able to review this, but there have been at least 3 planners on this particular project. So in the application, which you should have a copy of, you'll find the planner's report that Stacy was referencing. And in that pre-application meeting that Stacy was telling you about, this is done in September of this year, we actually discussed the assisted living, and that document was here. We talked about a portion of the property being required, a conditional use if RA being used for assisted living, which is actually why we went and did a mixed-use zoning designation. So we had the pre-application meeting where we talked about this, and in the course of that discussion with staff, we actually went to a mixed-use designation so that we'd have the flexibility of doing medical office facilities in general, the commercial as well as the assisted living facility. So as before our application was actually filed, the pre-application meeting with staff, we discussed assisted living then. What was submitted, however, because we didn't have a layout for what that assisted living would look like, back to Mr. Carmichael's statements, we did lay out, because an assisted living facility would not be such that it's generating children into the school system, we decided to go with a layout that was a subdivision layout, because that would be indicative of adding children to the school system. That we thought was provided more data to the staff, more data to you, than having said, oh no, there wouldn't be any. We'd rather err on the side of providing that information to you in advance. So the application included the 25 lot layout. That 25 lot layout was obviously amended because we provided a different one that GDOT directed us to, which is what you have and seen before. So Stacy is correct in that the application, the site plan submitted, had a 25 unit layout. And Stacy's also correct, it won't fit on there anymore. That won't happen anymore, because that was with the roadway coming here, the balance, the southern part of the property being all developed for residential, and that can't happen now with the layout, the spacing that's been now required by GDOT. So what that does do is it pushes the assisted living component, the senior component that we've contemplated from the beginning down on this end. We don't have a layout for that because we'll need an end user for that portion, and Stacy's exactly right. On Monday night, that was discussed with the community so that they would know that on the balance of the property, we were either going to be doing some form of single-family detached homes relevant to a senior-driven community, or in the alternative, we were looking at the assisted living facility. We're perfectly fine with what staff has recommended and the comments that you've made, Mr. Carmichael, about not having a drug rehab facility located or associated with that assisted living facility. So that's not an issue for us. But I would comment on Stacy's point about the out parcel that's 2 acres. More than likely that will be used for either commercial use or it will be used for some kind of office medical facility at that location. So I think Stacy's right. we said 2 acres commercial, but if we're going to do a designated area for just commercial uses, we want to include the 2 acre out parcel that's phase 2A within that designation, so that we would have the flexibility and the mixed use to put in that office or a commercial establishment there. But you can see once this gets cut down, you can see how little land you have available. Even if you left it RA, you could only build on the 7 acres, possibly four homes on that 7 acres, because it's an acre and a quarter minimum on a septic tank. So that's assuming you don't have sewer there. That would be the maximum or the minimum lot size actually. Given that layout, I don't think that really makes sense for what the development's being proposed, and a mixed use would allow for some flexibility in that, preferably the assisted living. So I did want to clear that up from the beginning, because I think that that's important that you do know that we had contemplated from the beginning the assisted living. I do also want to make sure you're aware that that we recognize, and Stacy's conditions, if you'll see their staff's conditions, based upon the discussions at the town hall meeting on Monday night, the additional conditions that staff is recommending, gas stations shall be prohibited, is fine with us. We understood that coming into this project from a 2-year lesson learned, if you will, 2 years ago. Also, we are aware that the community does not want, and nor does the commissioner want, these small box retail stores that are Dollar Generals, Dollar Trees, Family Dollars. We would recommend, however, that you be specific in saying that. The reason why is just because we're concerned that this is not definitive enough in the sense that it would preclude those low dollar convenience stores. So we're happy with you saying no Dollar General, no Dollar Tree, no Family Dollar or similar retail shall be prohibited, mirroring what Stacy's condition or Kenta's condition is, number 8. So with that would be fine with us. We don't want that competition there, so that makes sense for what we're proposing, and that would work for us. And then it would also be an express statement to the community that they will not see that on this site. So nobody's going to play games with that. I mean, that's a lot of words in there, and lawyers play games with words, and so that's a lot of words in there. If you specify exactly what's not coming in there, you can't argue that. So with that said, those were the major parts of it. We did have a set of conditions because, and this comes from what Stacy was saying earlier, we did add for a little bit more flexibility, not in terms of uses. Actually, we put in there that we would not allow apartments to be apartments would not be permitted. That would be struck from the uses that would go there. So again, to focus on the assisted living facility. When we drafted these, we did not include specified uses. We were putting out uses that we thought we should remove. Stacy's condition actually puts a use that would be permitted in their assisted living, which we're fine with. This would also allow for further development of the conditions, and since there is this discussion about the houses, should there be houses built there, which is not likely but possible, we want to specify and agree with staff that the minimum house sizes would be as stipulated. They put in a 2,400 square foot minimum heated floor space, and we took the number of dwelling units out because Stacy's right, you can't fit those dwellings on the property anymore, so we just took that out because the internal road may shift in terms of its design. It's an angular shape now, but this internal road may adjust depending on the end user here. The location has to stay at this point because GDOT's not going to permit the curb cut on 155. So we had to space it this way pursuant to the state requirements. But how this moves through, if it moves this way or it moves this way or moves back this way, that we ask for some flexibility on that. We're happy to work with the staff on those conditions as it moves forward to better define that now that I think they have a better understanding of what our limitations are and the layout of this plan, as well as the assisted living being a more emphasized end use for residential purposes. But we ask for your favorable consideration. The balance of the property at 7 acres is not really developable. and we would think that the commercial establishment will be beneficial to the community. I don't want to rehash everything else about this, but this is a prime location for that particular use. This is a grocer that is I would call it a higher end grocer that's going to be in the community. And I know that people have said that the distance between this grocer and the Kroger to the south or the Food Depot to the north, while it may be a distance in miles of about 3 miles, 2.8 to 3.3 miles in distance, it's an 18-minute drive either way. And what we notice is that it's highly, we all look for convenience, and that convenience would drive people to utilize the store. I'm certain that people will get up here and say, I'll never go to that store, I'll never use it. If you zone it, I'm never going there, in a manner of protest and boycott of that. And that may be true for people that are here, but I suspect that a lot of folks, including folks that showed up at the town hall meeting, will utilize the commercial facilities that if you choose to designate it for that purpose at this location. And I think that the end user will be a very good community partner, both in the Kellytown area and to the community as a whole for Henry County. We would ask for your favorable consideration of the request of mixed use for the entirety of the property, the 22 acres. And then we will also be happy to work with staff on any adjustments to the conditions, but we are committed to using that 7 acres for a mixed-use facility. Most definitely, we're trying for the assisted living facility that we have represented to you.
Okay. Mr. Richard.
Well, okay, this, maybe the picture's getting a little bit more clear. It's been kind of, kind of murky up till now, but I think we need to look at this plan, which is highly generalized, but we've got, if I'm correct, there's 22.31 acres total. And I think we already know that, of course, that hadn't been approved yet by this board, but it's proposed that apparently that a commercial store would be on a part of it that's 11.30 acres after you subtract out the acreage for site OP1, which was 1.18 acres, and then phase 2A, subtract that out to 2.63 acres, and then phase 2B, which if there is a residential development, that's likely probably where it would occur, 7.31 acres. So what uses would you contemplate based on these parcels that I mentioned, to kind of summarize what, so we can get a better idea what this mixed use is going to look like.
Yes, that's a very good
And
question.
how it would impact the community.
Yes, sir, so what we would represent to you is that OP1 would be an out parcel commercial, and it would be, and then same with the phase 2A, commercial or office would be the two uses that we would submit to you there. The phase 2B, 7 acres would be a residential use, and would not have apartments there because we specified that in our conditions, and the staff can add that to the conditions that they've drafted. So that would be the residential component, would be that 7 acre tract. And that's where we would want to try to work in that assisted living.
Possibly be the senior assisted living.
Yes.
And senior only, not any other kind of assisted living, but just seniors, correct?
It would either be it would be an assisted living facility. I can't speak to the age group that would be in there, but it would be an assisted living facility.
I guess what I'm getting at, it would not involve drug or alcohol.
No, we're good with the staff adding that as a condition to eliminate that from the plan altogether. I don't think that would be a good use right next to the grocery store anyway.
Any additional questions, Mr. Richard?
Did that answer your question? I want to make sure I got that.
Yes, for now.
And Mr. Carmichael, you had questions, and I don't know if I answered all those for you.
What type of public amenities and places will be provided under this plan?
Public amenities,
Right.
other than the requirements for your overlay district, that does require the multi-use paths that are
Right.
required, and extensive landscaping along. In addition, the staff is required, and it's typical of your staff to require us to preserve right-of-way for right-of-way expansion, and that's also in the conditions of zoning. So that would be preserved right-of-way for the future. We wouldn't build anything in that area so that it would be available for a future widening of the road.
Okay. Will you be extending the sidewalks along 155 and also Kellytown Road? I don't know whether the sidewalk on Kellytown Road goes all the way to Old Kellytown Road or not.
I believe we would be required to, over the site plan shows that, at least for this portion of the commercial area right here, all the way through and around. Some of the sidewalks are already in existence.
Right.
So we would utilize what has already been built out. And then I think the overlay ordinance requires us to pull it all the way down, if I remember correctly, 155. So you have a very stringent overlay ordinance that is pedestrian friendly. So we'd have to follow that.
Is that it, Mr. Carmen?
For now.
Okay, Mr. Rich.
One last question, I hope. The internal road that you're showing coming from 155 and then on behind the grocery store, could that be the primary access for whatever use is on Phase 2B rather than adding traffic onto Old Kellytown Road? Could that be the way for traffic to enter and egress, say, for example, a senior assisted living facility, if it's on that 7 acres?
You refer to this entrance here?
Yes.
Yes, that will probably be the primary access point, yes.
So there wouldn't be a need for traffic on Old Kellytown Road?
We haven't, I mean, that would be up to Henry County, Henry County DOT, as well as the.
Okay, well,
yeah.
Yes, and I'm sure the fire departments and other would have some inputs on that, but
Yes, sir.
all right, but the idea that this new road or street would be the primary access to parcel or Phase 2A and Phase 2B.
Yes, sir, and that's contemplated in the plan, as I think you've already noticed, that is contemplated in the plan, because that's the major point of interchange. You see how wide that opening is for that traffic to come in. And that's going to be your main flow of traffic anyways, given that Old Kellytown Road is dead end at the end.
Yeah. What we don't want to see is a lot of traffic impacting some of the smaller roads in the area, like Kibbe Road or the Ashland subdivision.
Yes, sir, I do understand that. And and had we not placed this on the plan, you would have had one access point here and then no access point showing for you here, which would, I think, been problematic over the course of time.
I have a question for staff.
Okay.
Under this proposed mixed-use designation, doesn't that require a certain amount of the land be provided for open spaces?
Yes, sir, Mr. Carmichael. There are a couple of layers of regulation for this one. You've got zoning conditions, you've got the overlay district, which removes the necessity for a lot of our conditions, but then there are also supplemental standards for development within this mixed-use zoning district, and part of that is a requirement for both open space and public space. So, yes, sir, that is correct.
And that will be addressed, Mr. Carmichael, to your point, that will be addressed as we develop in that residential area, because that's where it would likely be located. And again, this is I understand your quandary, but we are talking about 7 acres in a triangular area that's well defined by these roads. It's contained, you know exactly where it is. But in that development, specifically in the residential, you're going to want to have some public spaces and some open space areas. So that's going to have to be built into that. When we have that end user, they're going to have to comply with your ordinances. You'll notice we're not asking for deviations in any of your overlay ordinances or your mixed use ordinances. In fact, we're further restricting, and I would like to point out that a mixed use commercial designation actually has 4 less uses than a C2 commercial designation. So the mixed use commercial is actually more narrow than your C2 designation.
Any additional questions? Okay. If not, you may be seated, Mr. Wells.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
At this time, we'd like to allot 10 minutes for anyone wishing to speak in favor of this case. 10 minutes for anyone wishing to speak in favor of the case. No one's coming forward. We would also like to allot 10 minutes for anyone wishing to speak in opposition. Please state your name and address for the record.
My name is Bob Bullington. I live at 537 Kibbe Road, McDonough, Georgia. When I came here tonight, I was really opposed to this. And I've sat here for an hour and a half, and I'm really opposed to it now. There's just too many areas now that that's okay, we got you covered. On this very front corner out here, it's a big mystery. We don't know what it's going to be, but we got you covered. If you look now, we got 2 acres there, and in phase 2, we may put assisted living home there, or we may put some medical facilities, or whatever that comes along. And now we've done chopped it up, so it's absolutely undesirable on the remaining 7 acres for residential. And just like this gentleman asked the question a while ago, could that all be commercial too? Well, sure it can. So now we got 22 acres that started out mixed use, but it looks to me like it's going to be just totally commercial. The whole corner. And I imagine up there at East Lake, that big project up there, I imagine a lot of people felt like that was covered too, but if you look at it now, it's got a tremendous pile of dirt and an awful mess with the property up there where Kroger was going to be. But anyway, I am certainly opposed to it. This is a quality of life for us. It interrupts it, and will cause safety issues, and I am really opposed to it. Thank you.
Okay.
All right, Robert Kolpak. I'm going to read you guys back from 2017. You guys got the same thing, just make sure everybody knows. But a request to amend the future land use map designation of subject property does not seem reasonable based on current zoning trends of the area. A portion of 155 in Kellytown have a predominantly residential rural character. It is proper planning practice to encourage commercial developments first within the activity center nodes to prevent future sprawl development, which would mean what I was saying earlier, East Lake Parkway, 155, Highway 138, 155, great ideas, not where they're going to go. It's probably cheaper land. The developer, if everybody's alluding to, has already left our area. If you guys know, Publix on Fairview Road is a police precinct. The Publix on Jonesboro Road, it's a wonderful, would you want to take a guess what it is? Does anybody know? It is a Goodwill, and it's a Dollar Tree. So I'm glad we put there, but when we go to pave paradise and knock out beautiful homes and the area that we have now, we're going to put a parking lot in. And mark my words, in 5-8 years, when somebody doesn't do what the grocery doesn't meet their needs, they're going to move. So we got a couple areas open, and from 2017, what was voted by you guys saying don't approve and deny, appreciate 2 guys voting against it. I'd hope everybody would consider this area and put them where we already have commercial properties. Thank you.
Kylie Harrod. I live at 676 Kibbe Road, McDonough, Georgia. Well, I want to begin by stating, so the applicant said that while it's just a few miles each way to a grocery store, there's Kroger to the south and there's Food Depot to the north. Well, I can speak, leaving from Kibbe Road, that takes me maybe 6 minutes, not 18 like the applicant stated. There's no need to put a Publix here. Which, I mean, looking at what's been going on in the county, that's pretty likely the end user. But the purpose of development, it's a rise in the quality of life of the population and the creation or expansion of local regional income and employment opportunities. I recognize that, but we have to do that without damaging the resources of the environment that's already existing there. And not even to mention the historical home that has been there for over 100 years now, upwards of almost 200. And so this agenda item, it deviates from that core purpose. It'll deteriorate the quality of life of the existing community members, and it will replace our natural landscape with impervious surfaces that will accelerate runoff and flood our nearby streams. But the concerns don't end there. 2 years ago, I was at some of the meetings regarding the same property, and I remember the applicant stated, the community voiced strong concern with a gas station due to the close proximity of a school, and since we don't have an end user, we thought we should wait until we have an end user. Well, the vast majority of our community, as you can see tonight, have additional concerns regarding safety, increased traffic, and even the potential devaluation of properties due to the addition of a septic line. And I believe all of these deserve to be answered prior to a vote on this. An end user should be required. We have all of this space, and we don't even know what they're going to do with it. We might end up with a McDonald's on that corner. Does that complement our rural community there? No. No, it doesn't. And I strongly urge you to oppose this and to think about the community members who live on Kibbe Road and Ashland Ridge and even Brook Hollow and down the road as well, because it's going to impact all of us. Thank you.
Mark Paxton, 855 Stone Glen Court, McDonough, Georgia, which is in Brook Hollow. I want to clarify, because I do appreciate you taking serious those concerns of ours who may lose land for the sewer on this. And in fairness to the developer, our letters and in-person interaction have been with LEED. You may know who that is more than, I think it's a land engineering development company, who I think is going to be the ones doing the sewer. But in all their interaction with me, they have represented themselves as being from the developer. So I want to be transparent with that in fairness to him. The people who we're dealing with have led us to believe they're working with the developer. Thank you.
My name is Avise Brown. I live at 111 Lost Forest Drive, and I'm up here again. I'd like for you to take something into consideration. When you, with the commercial, the stores and the restaurants and everything, it's going to increase. Think about the crime rate. It's going to increase. And put a senior citizen facility there is going to put the senior citizens in harm's way. We are, as I said before, totally opposed of a commercial change. Residents should be there, not commercial.
Rosemary Hagler, 751 Kibbe Road. Again, I would just ask you to consider the feelings of the community, and I would just like to point out all of the times that these gentlemen have said, I'm not sure, I don't know, this could be. It's still all very vague, and if you approve it, you don't even know what you're approving. Thank you.
Yeah, I'm Ray Hagler. I live at 751 Kibbe Road, and the sewer that they're proposing goes right through my front yard. And I have about 17 acres, and they want to run the sewer right down through the middle of it, so it'll be 200 foot from my house, right next to a creek, cutting down a bunch of trees that I don't want cut down. It looks to me like this whole development is dependent on the sewer line. and I don't want to sell my property, and I don't want them to come steal it to put a sewer line in so this guy can get rich. Just wanted to put that down, and y'all better think about where the sewer's gonna go, because you can't develop it without it, and I don't plan on letting it go through my property. And the people that I talk to that owns the other properties that it's going through, they don't like it either. And I know the developer is the one that is dependent on who's gonna pay for it, but has he got enough money to buy everybody's property down there, or can they find another route? Because there's a school right across the street. I don't know what their sewage runs off of, but they can sure run it over to wherever that sewer is coming to them that feeds that school instead of going through my property. And I'm very concerned about it, and I don't want it to happen, and everything I can do to stop it, I will. Thank you.
Okay, no one else is coming forward. Does the board have additional questions for staff or the applicant? Mr. Carmichael? Mr. Richard? No. Okay. If there's no additional questions, we would like to call the case, please.
RC 1921 JWA Ventures 2 LLC of Montgomery, Alabama requests a rezoning from RA Residential Agricultural to MU Mixed Use for property located at 109 Old Kellytown Road in land lots 58 and 71 of the 11th District. The property consists of 22.31 plus or minus acres, and the request is for a mixed-use development consisting of a grocery anchor shopping center, ancillary shops, and outparcels. District 4, and the report is presented by Kent Lanham, Planner 1, and Stacy Jordan, Chief Planner.
Okay. We've heard the case. Do we have a motion?
Mr. Chairman, I'd like to make a motion on case RZ-19-21, where a request for a mixed-use zoning be permitted. I propose that this matter be tabled until the applicant can meet with the staff to provide more definitive answers in terms of the commercial activity that will be coming to this particular site, and also to firm up what conditions will be applied to this request.
I have a motion. Do I have a second?
Second.
Okay, and motion and second. All in favor? Motion carried. It is. Call the next case, please.
RC 1922, the Reservoir Group of McDonough, Georgia, requests a rezoning from RA Residential Agricultural to RS Residential Suburban for property located at 1555 Chambers Road in land lots 109 and 116 of the 6th District. The property consists of 54.45 plus or minus acres, and the request is single-family homes and townhomes. District 2, and the report is presented by Stacy Jordan, Chief Planner.
Good evening, Mr. Chairman.
Good evening.
Board members, the request before you is for a property located on Chambers, just south of Jonesboro Road, as indicated on the overhead and also in your exhibit books. The subject property is outlined in green, and you'll notice that there are two areas of frontage along Chambers Road. The zoning of the property is RA, Residential Agricultural, which is indicated as the white shaded areas on this map. The red shaded areas indicate commercial. The blue areas indicate OI, Office Institutional. The pink indicates planned development, which includes residential and commercial components. And the various shades of yellow indicate smaller lot subdivisions. So you'll notice that there is a mix of different zonings in this area. Our future land use map, which is our policy guide, indicates the subject property and the surrounding area for for medium density residential up to 6 dwelling units per acre. The applicant's request is for a rezoning from RA to RS residential suburban, which allows a mixture of different types of residential product. So you'll notice from the site plan that's illustrated in your exhibit books and also on the overhead, there are townhouses that are proposed as a part of this property. The balance is single family. We're looking at up to 14 single-family residential lots with a width of about 75 feet. We're looking at the balance of the single-family residential lots at being about, I believe that's 60 feet. The applicant can tell us a little bit more about the specifics of this request, but for 149 total lots on this amount of acreage, we're looking at a net density of 5.68, which is supported by our future land use map, which allows up to 6 dwelling units per acre. Staff has noted the merits of the applicant's request, the future land use map designation, and so forth, and staff does recommend approval of the applicant's request with several conditions. Many of our conditions are regarding the access to the subject property from Chambers Road. For example, a traffic study would be required and so forth. Some of our conditions have to do with the facade requirements, garage requirements, and so forth. Our staff has actually contracted with a consultant for the first time before you tonight, and so this staff report was provided by our consultant. One of the reasons why we wanted to bring in an outside consultant was to get a fresh look, and that is actually what happened. So one of the recommendations from our consultant is that each of the single-family detached homes would include a front porch. And it was indicated from our consultant that this was part of our comprehensive plan. So we checked, and it is. Front porches are actually encouraged in our comprehensive plan as a part of our policy guide. So I'm very happy to say that we are recommending a condition that there be front porches on all of the single-family detached homes. In conjunction with the front porches, which the comp plan says is meant to encourage friendliness in the community, we are also recommending a condition that says that there would be upgraded sidewalks from the 4-foot standard to 5 feet and an increased landscape strip between the sidewalk and the street of 3 feet, which is an upgrade from our minimum of 2 in our Unified Land Development Code. We received comments from the fire department as a part of our review. The fire department has noted the 42 townhouses that are located toward the back of the subject property, which requires a stream crossing. And they have noted that with over 30 dwelling units, a second access point should be required. And so because of our fire department's concern and expression, we do recommend a condition that states that the owner or the developer would coordinate with our fire department to address this need for a secondary access point. As a part of our connectivity, which we want to encourage for new development, there is a requirement for cross-access easements to adjacent properties. And we would note that there are some neighboring properties that are already developed, so that's not feasible to provide cross-access easements in these areas. So it's largely the areas on the southwest portion of the subject property that would be available for such cross-access easements. We've noted that the applicant has proposed 30-foot landscape buffers around the development's perimeter, and we want to encourage that and require that as a part of a zoning condition, but I wanted to state for the record that this 30-foot landscape buffer would in no way impede the provision of the cross-access easements, which would need to be stubbed out to the property line for future connectivity. And with that, Mr. Chair, I'd be pleased to answer questions.
Okay. Does the board have questions for staff?
I do. Okay. Mr. Chairman, thank you. Hi, Stacy. Thank you. Your choice of words, I just kind of want to get clarification on something. When you said that it would be a requirement for them to coordinate with the fire department to address the second entrance requirement. Does that mean, are you saying that a second entrance is the requirement and they have to get that required second entrance approved by the fire department, or that they're just supposed to work with the fire department in an effort to try?
So what we're saying, and I have to say, tonight we have told you that we are not experts in a lot of different things. And I think we've already said that we're not experts in all things fire department, but we truly are not. But we're just so glad to get the comments from the fire department, and their concern was that creek crossing. But we're also recommending that there be cross-access easements to adjoining property. So we weren't comfortable with saying that there shall be a second stream crossing. If the fire department would be satisfied with an emergency access to Chambers Road through an adjoining property, we don't want to preclude that with our zoning conditions. So what we recommend is that they coordinate with the fire department to come up with a solution.
With the goal being an emergency route?
Yes, sir. And if that happens to be a second stream crossing, that's fine. If it's some other way, that's fine.
Just another way?
Just another way, that's correct.
Thank you for the clarification.
Okay. Any additional questions for staff? Mr. Richard?
On the second entrance issue now, I think that's from the International Fire Code, I believe, that says that you have to have a second emergency access after you have 30 dwellings or 30 lots. However, our ULDC says says it's 50 lots, from a single public street before you have to have a second entrance. So there's a little bit of concern there, but if they have to have the second access for the townhomes, could it be through something like a sewer easement or some kind of a public easement, not necessarily a public paved street?
Yes, sir, that is correct. If it is an emergency entrance that is not open to the public, that meets the fire department's approval, that this condition would allow that. Yes, sir.
Okay, just saying that though, was there any consideration that the townhomes might be placed up closer or next to Chambers Road in this other brown area, and then those lots put back where you make the creek crossing? It's just a thought. I'm not saying it would be required, but it seems like that the more denser uses should be up off of the major thoroughfare.
Mr. Risher, I think that is an excellent suggestion. And since you have brought that to my attention, it makes perfect sense that we have referenced the townhome component, but we didn't indicate the context for our condition, which is development across the stream. And perhaps if the developer put the townhomes in a different place, we would lose the context for this condition. So instead of townhome component, perhaps it should simply say development on the other side of the stream.
Okay.
Because that's what we mean.
Any additional questions? Okay. If not, we'd like to call the applicant forward, please. Please state your name and address for the record.
Good evening, Chair, members of the board. My name is Steve Moore, Moorbass Consulting, 1350 Keys Ferry Court, McDonough, Georgia. I know it's been a long evening for you guys, and I'm going to try to make this painless except for these conditions. And if you thought the pond was a big deal, well, I hope we've maybe we've all learned something, but we're going to work hard at it. So I am representing the Reservoir Group in this request of the rezoning of 54.5 acres. This property is about 800 feet south of the intersection of Chambers Road and Jonesboro Road. So the commercial kind of area there, just south of that. As designed, and I know Stacy was mentioning the different pods of development, but as it is currently designed, it is separated into 3 distinct pods. The pod that is on the left of your screen is the larger of the lots. Those are the 75-foot lots, and there's 14 of those. We estimate homes in that pod in the 21 to 2,500 square foot range. The southernmost entrance, which is page right, would serve as the main entrance for the subdivision or for the community. It has been designed as a divided median. I don't know if you can see if you see the two roads there in that center section, with open space in the middle that's intended to house the entrance signage with the water feature incorporated into it. Our architect has worked on a sample rendering of something similar to what we're considering for that entrance. That entrance will also access the balance of the residential lots, which are the 60-foot lots in the heart of the project there. Well, just past the divided median entrance, there's an amenity center there that's a central amenity that will be for both the 75 and the 60-foot lots. The amenity area will include a pool, a cabana, mail kiosk, paved parking lot, and a playground, again, at the main entrance there. And then for the area that we were talking about with the across the creek, we are designating that as senior cottages. They're intended to be age-targeted, attached residential, fee-simple residential units. The reason for the location is based on some topography and based on some privacy, which is located on the other side of that, on the south side of the lake. The property is bordered all the way to the south by a creek. So this is pretty well established buffer here. Then you have the lake here, and it just felt like it was a kind of a serene location for that use. There's also a consideration for possibly gating that pod. If so, it would make sense for it to be at the back side of the project than at the beginning, but since we have to have interconnectivity between all these different uses to meet the fire department requirements. So that's just the background behind why it is decided there. That senior cottage section would also have its own amenity center. It'll have, it's designated here, but it will have walking trails, access to the lake, an open air pavilion, and a small dog park. So that will be completely separate. Again, if it was gated, obviously it would only be accessible by those residents. Architecturally, this is what we are considering for the 75-foot lots, which again are here. So these are very modern kind of architecture, but they still blend in some craftsman feel in some areas, but meets the zoning condition, the architectural conditions that staff has proposed. There's a few ranch products that's blended in with those. The 60-foot, very similar style architecture. Again, some ranch products that are blended in there on the top row. And then for the senior cottages, we're considering something very similar to this. That is actually a 2-unit building. We are contemplating possibly 2s and 4s, but again, our architects are working on the exact floor plans. There'll be, I think what we have drawn is actually like really truly set up as townhomes. I think they're 24 foot wide by 8 per building. These would be more like 30 feet wide units by maybe 50 feet or so deep, and then 2 or maybe 4 attached, but clustered kind of in quads, not stacked on top of each other, obviously if they're senior or age targeted, but just a different look that is kind of just different than traditional townhomes. So, those, let me see if I've, okay, so yeah, future land use map, obviously, as Stacy mentioned, does allow us, or designate this property rather, as 6 units to the acre. We are under that, and our gross density, I mean, we do have some open space that obviously has to come out. I have this discussion a lot in these presentations, that you have to take open space out when you're calculating net density in Henry County. But our overall gross density is much less than the net density that we are proposing. I think we're just over 2 units, 2.5 units to the acre gross. We've read staff's conditions. We are in agreement with the majority of them. Again, I apologize for this in advance, but we do need to talk about a few of them because these are new conditions. These are conditions we've never seen on zoning cases. As Stacy mentioned, your planning consultant, I think this is their first planning case that they've reviewed, that they provided their own conditions, and so we just got to talk through a couple of them. The first 1 through 7, no issues with. 8, I think the 8 is fine too. That's the one that requires the interparcel connectivity. Condition 9 we're okay with, but I would like the wording that Stacy referenced earlier to be added to the end of that just says something to the effect of you have to provide interparcel act, or that the 30-foot landscape buffer is required around the periphery except for those locations where you are stubbing out roads to the adjacent properties. Just trying to keep us from having to come back to you guys for a zoning modification due to a technicality. Condition number 10 is the condition that Stacy referenced earlier, which was with regards to the front porches on every house. That, again, just a brand new condition that we've never really been, open or at least exposed to. The building products that we proposed have, a majority of them do have front porches. See if I can pull that back up there. Whether they have the exact porch that meets the specifications that the planners suggested, I think it was like 6 feet deep, 8 by 6. I don't know exactly. They don't all have front porches, but some of them do. We can make them all front porches. We would like to have the flexibility of some of them having stoops maybe instead of porches, or maybe having a percentage of the houses that had front porches. But it's just it's a new condition. And I'm not sure how many future subdivisions and projects this will apply to, or if this is going to stop here. Don't know, but it's brand new to me, so I'm just kind of going to lean on you for maybe your input. But we're okay with the porches. As you can see, a majority of our products have those porches. We would like maybe to put it as a percentage. It says 75%, or that every house will have either a porch or a covered stoop, something along those lines. We'd like to have at least some consideration with regards to that. Don't understand the perpendicular sidewalk requirement from the front. I know what it is, from the front porch straight to the road. I don't understand the applicability of, and when you use that and when you don't. do you use it on a 5-acre subdivision lot that's the house is 150 feet off the road? I know there's not many of them, but there's certainly an opportunity that could exist. Do you have a sidewalk that shoots straight down through your, from your front door perpendicularly to the street? I think that in neo-traditional subdivision designs like Brush Arbor, they make perfect sense when the architecture supports that type of look. But when you have a small lot and you have a sidewalk that cuts it in half, and I think the original intent behind those sidewalks was to convey people from their front door to their mailbox, but we don't have mailboxes anymore. So I'm not 100% sure that it has applicability here, but again, we'll just defer to your judgment on that. But we would like to not make that a requirement. Certainly if the builders wanted to do that, they could, but for it to be a requirement for all houses just feels maybe like it could be reconsidered. The last one is one that I really do feel strongly about. This is the one, condition number 11. This is brand new. Has to do with the upgraded sidewalk, Stacy mentioned. Currently, the ULDC and the accepted roadway section that the county has, that David Simmons follows and dreams about each night, because it's just his go-by. And if you don't meet this, you don't get approved. And that is a 2-foot landscape strip off the back curb and a 4-foot sidewalk. And all the utilities have been worked out with Atlanta Gas Light, with Henry County Water Authority, with all the wire-based utility providers. Everybody has adopted and accepted one of 2 basic utility placement guides. This is the one that most people follow. This is the one that doesn't have trees in the right-of-way. The red lines represent what the new requirement is. As you can see, if you can see, it pushes that sidewalk over the water line there and over the gas line there. And I just have a very strong feeling that that's not going to fly with those utility providers. Like I said, there was a lot of work in putting that together. I think that this requirement just conflicts with what we're allowed to do with these templates and these guides that were given by the ULDC, by David Simmons, by the different folks at the utility authorities. I just don't, I think it conflicts. I mean, that's all I can say about it. So I don't think it's a great condition. I understand wanting to improve the widths of sidewalks, but it's already gone from, I think they used to be 3 feet, now they're 4 feet. Now we're going from 4 feet to 5 feet. And it's just, unless there's other work done to pave the path, no pun intended, for allowing those variable road sections, we got to stick with what we can do. I mean, we literally cannot do what they're asking us to do without a whole bunch of people approving and changing all their codes. Short of that, I think we're good with everything else. So with that, I think I'll see if you have any questions. Be happy to answer.
Okay. Does the board have questions for the applicant? Mr. Moore.
Hey, Mr. Moore.
Hey there.
So, if I understand correctly, one of the main reasons why you don't want the utilities tucked up under the sidewalk is it's a maintenance issue. If there's a disruption in the line,
Correct.
It's easier to get through dirt than it is a sidewalk.
Right.
And because of the way the pre-existing codes are.
Yes.
Okay. I'm leery about the whole thing about the porches and the perpendicular sidewalks, because to me that sounds subjective to someone's opinion. Somebody might have had a bad experience with a porch as a kid, and maybe they don't like porches. Somebody else likes a porch. I don't know. I think when we start passing out rules about an aesthetic, I think we're crossing the line as decision makers. I'd be in favor of removing the stipulations about the sidewalk, the placement of the sidewalk, the perpendicular sidewalk, and all of them having porches. I liked your idea about a percentage. I would say maybe 50% porch and 50% stoop. Something covered.
Sure.
Keep you dry when you're unlocking your door. But and I understand the other rules, like when we say a side entry garage, because if someone doesn't keep their garage nice and they leave their door open, everybody has to look at that, and it makes the neighborhood unsightly. I can understand certain stipulations, but a straight sidewalk versus a curved one when maybe the landscape doesn't. I don't know. I think that's a stretch. So I would be in favor of removing those. Can you elaborate on that any more about this one here? Is there any other?
No, you're exactly right. I mean, those are the reasons why, I mean, there are bends and elbows that you have to put on these water lines to keep them out of pavement edges because of that exact reason, because they don't want to tear up asphalt or concrete and have to repair that if there is a leak or a break. I mean, the idea is for it to be in easily accessible areas under dirt, not under pavement. And so that's the reason why this thing, I think, is the way it is, this utility placement detail. And so I think that we would be a lot of people. I've talked to David on another couple of zoning cases about just of the possibility of an open ditch roadway section in rural areas, rural subdivisions that are 1 and 2 acre lot subdivisions. Why do we need curb and gutter? Why can't we just do an open ditch, kind of more rural horse farm style? Doesn't exist. Doesn't exist. I mean, it would have to be written and drafted and go to the water authority and go to AT&T and go to Atlanta Gas Light and go to Charter and everybody and get them to agree where they're going to put the utilities, because there is no placement guide. So I know that is a product of a whole lot of cooperation from a whole lot of people, and I just don't think we can just unilaterally just decide with a zoning condition to change it.
Yes, sir. I appreciate your build on that. So my next question is for Mr. Stacy. Mr. Stacy, I want to be open-minded about this. I tend to think, the maintenance of the lines out from under a sidewalk is a smart move, but can you tell me why you saw favor in that suggestion enough to include it in the requirements?
Absolutely. I don't understand why we can't have upgraded sidewalks just because we've never done it that way. And it's true that our Unified Land Development Code prohibits underground utilities underneath the sidewalk. But that's not a reason why we can't all get together and work with the utility providers to find the most adequate place to put it. And will this subdivision have gas service?
I don't know.
I mean, there may be some ways that we can get around some things, but if we can work together and get a better product, I want to be able to do that.
Okay.
And we're fine complying with a section if the onus not put on us to fix it, because we're just trying to do what is already outlined in the ordinance. I mean, it doesn't give you a whole lot of flexibility. It says, unless you come up with something better, it says you follow this standard or this standard. And so if somebody else adopts that standard and doesn't, we're not tasked with that. I just could only imagine it's a big coordination effort to get all the powers that be to agree on that section. So,
Mr. Richard.
Yes, this property surrounds a large piece of property, and I think it all comes from the same ownership. But is your design flexible enough where it, at some time in some future phase, that this larger parcel that's in between?
Yes, sir.
I guess the two segments of this development that front on Chambers Road, could this somehow
you talking about this property?
be incorporated as part of this development, either through a street extension or some other means?
We could certainly, with the way the property's configured, incorporate that very easily, especially with the fact that this road has no lots fronting it here. So that should be very easy to incorporate that into the project, but it's my understanding that the owner it tends to remain there.
Right, I understand that.
But at some point in the future, yes, I believe it could be incorporated.
Yes, I'm very aware of that, and I just want, I guess for the ownership's sake, that that there would be the possibility one day of it being, part of.
Yes, sir, and that's why I asked about that.
Of the overall plan.
Okay.
Okay. All right, that's all I had for now.
Okay. Any additional questions? Stacey, I just have one question in reference to the porch.
Yes, sir.
What stipulates the porch?
So our consultant brought it to our attention that our comprehensive plan included that. So we took a look And you may recall in our previous hearings where we were discussing comp plan amendments and so forth, that there was a notation to a map with a red arrow. And so we were looking at that suburban area, and this subject property falls within that suburban area as well, and there's some policy guidelines that are attached to each one of these various areas and so forth. And what this says is that it's going to be our policy to encourage front porches and pedestrian friendliness and so forth. And so our consultant interpreted that as this is an opportunity to implement that policy guide by requiring the front porches. And maybe people will sit out there and maybe they'll speak to their neighbors or so forth. And let's make it easy for them to get out to the sidewalk and for a neighbor to come and visit you. And let's have upgraded sidewalks where people can actually walk side by side without somebody having to step off the sidewalk. And so this is the impetus for it, and we thought that that was a fresh approach, and so we wanted to bring that before you as our recommendation.
Okay. All right, now I can understand the upgraded sidewalk,
Yes,
but in reference to the porch, this is not something that's going to be carried out throughout the county. This is just in this particular area?
Our comp plan says that we should encourage front porches specifically in this suburban area, and there's a lot of Henry County that's in that designation. And and I have to tell you, I haven't memorized it, but there may be other areas where we're supposed to be encouraging front porches, but definitely in that suburban area in which this subject property falls.
Okay. Yeah, Mr. Moore.
Stacy, with that in mind, the applicant's suggestion of a percentage, you say that it tells us we're to encourage it, not to mandate it. And that's like a shall and may kind of conversation.
Sure.
So would it meet the staff's intent of what you're trying to do with this stipulation if they said we're happy to do it, but can we do 50% or 60% or whatever?
Well, that's one of the reasons why we have these hearings, because we need to rely on y'all's wisdom. Now, there's a difference between our comprehensive plan, which is literally a policy guide, and the ordinance, which is your overlay districts and your development standards and so forth like that. But if we don't impose the requirements, the encouragement is just a public service announcement. Who actually sits down and reads that comprehensive plan? So I think it's very appropriate to have the requirement, but as far as, is it 100%, is it 50%? Staff is okay with the condition reading that 50% of the homes shall have the front porches and so forth, and the balance shall be covered stoops. We have no objection to that.
Sure, because I mean, if it meant you would pull your recommendation for approval or not.
No.
Yeah, I mean.
No, certainly not.
I see what you're trying to do. We're trying to accommodate.
Yes.
Trying to work it out.
Yes,
So,
sir, absolutely.
Mr. Rich.
It might be more helpful though if some of these suggested changes maybe be brought to us at a meeting where we can look at them and rather than putting them in for the first time in someone's project. I think I'd like to see. I think I'd rather see that approach than.
So we're not making someone the guinea pig.
Stacey, I guess my concern is that if it's an overlay district and the requirement is there, it's understandable. But if this is a pick and choose type, it's kind of hard for me to go down that path. It's either there or it's not. Or
So
if it's an
what
overlay requirement, it's understandable because
Right.
it's required in that particular area.
Right. So our Unified Land Development Code was adopted initially in 2009, and we've made changes ever since then. And our latest change to our overlay districts was last year in 2018, and I don't recall a front porch requirement being in the law.
Right.
That being said, it's the purpose of zoning conditions to not replicate the ULDC, but to require things that aren't otherwise required. And so we're interested to see if the county, meaning our zoning board and our board of commissioners, wants to have such a stipulation. And if this is something that the county wants, then we'll recommend this as a zoning condition moving forward until the county chooses otherwise, or we codify it as a change to the law. But this is our first, and there has to be a first.
Okay, so you're basically leaving that option there on the board, the same as you would if you had side entrance garage?
Yes, sir, that's correct.
Okay.
Feasible.
All right.
So it's a requirement, but yet there's flexibility within that.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. Thank you. Right. Any additional questions for staff? Mr. Carmichael?
Question, Steve. Steve, will these be customized homes?
They'll be. I think the current pick is a couple of local builders, but they'll be semi-custom maybe. I think that was probably the best term for it. I think they'll be able to pick some of their finishes, but they'll have a model book or a plan book of the types of houses that they would be picking from. Is that accurate? Yes, sir.
So what would you be comfortable with in terms of the percentage on the covered porch? Because what I'm thinking, because you're a guinea pig too, right? So 50-50 to me sounds a little like maybe not enough. I'm thinking more like 60-40. If we start at a higher threshold, it causes issues or problems, and you squawk about it a little bit, and then the next time it comes up, maybe it does go down to 50-50. But that's kind of what I'm thinking. I mean, that's not that much of a difference.
60-40. I mean, that sounds fine.
That we're just getting a little bit more of that concept that maybe they're looking for.
And I think we're okay with the size of the porch, as far as the minimum goes. And then the other 40 would just be a covered stoop. Is that what?
Yeah, that's how I would condition that.
Yes,
Would
ma'am.
that work for you?
Yes, ma'am. That's fine.
Okay.
Any additional questions for that? Okay. No additional questions. You may be seated, sir. We would like to allot 10 minutes for anyone wishing to speak in favor of this case. No one's coming forward. We would like to allot 10 minutes for anyone wishing to speak in opposition. Any additional questions for the applicant or staff? Call the case, please.
RC 1922, the Reservoir Group of McDonough, Georgia, requests a rezoning from RA Residential Agriculture to RS Residential Suburban for property located at 1555 Chambers Road in land lots 109 and 116 of the 6th District. The property consists of 54.45 plus or minus acres, and the request is single-family homes and townhomes. District 2, and the report is presented by Stacy Jordan, Chief Planner.
Okay. You've heard the case. Do we have a motion?
I do. Here we go again. All righty then. So I make a motion to agree with staff recommendation to approve this request with approving conditions, agreeing with conditions 1 through 8. And then we'll make an adjustment to 9, and I believe if I heard Steve say correctly, he would like an exception in there in locations where they're stubbing out for roads, correct?
Yes, ma'am, that was my understanding.
Yeah.
Just a phrase, except for road connectivity.
A road connectivity. And then on condition 10, we will adjust that to the 60-40, 60%, to include 60% with covered porches, 40% with a covered stoop, and then let's eliminate the sidewalk requirement from the house.
Okay.
Okay? And then item 11, and I'm not quite sure how to word this, perhaps you can help me. He wants to move away from the requirement there, 5 by 3. I'm not sure how to adjust that to accommodate keeping everything, making accommodations for the utilities.
If we want the utilities and I'm just being real honest, if we want the utilities to be in the exact spot that they've always been, we're gonna need to leave it as, well, you could just take it off.
Oh, I can just eliminate that?
Right. If we're leaving the utilities as they are, if we're not interested in, you know, trying to find a different place for them, then we could just take number 11 off. If we change the width of that grassy strip between the back of the curb and the sidewalk,
Right.
in any way, or if we change the width of the sidewalk in any way, we're going to have to change the placement of the utilities.
Okay, and that was the issue, correct? Okay. All right, so then, included in that motion, then we'll eliminate condition number 11 from the approval.
Okay, we have a motion.
Second.
We have a second by Mr. Moore. All in favor? I'm sorry, discussion?
Is that what you're saying?
No, just the sidewalk. No, they'll put sidewalks in. It's this requirement, the 5x3. The parameters of the sidewalks, so as not to disrupt access to the utilities or the placement where they currently are. There will be sidewalks. Yes. Yes.
Any other discussion? We have a motion and a second. All in favor? Motion carries.
Thank you.
Call the next case, please.
Is RZ 1923, Heritage Property Holdings LLC of Stockbridge, Georgia, requests a rezoning from RA, Residential Agricultural, to R1, Single Family Residence, for property located on the south side of Hampton Locust Grove Road to the west of Brindley Way in Land Lot 209 of the 2nd District. The property consists of 30 plus or minus acres, and the request is for a single-family residential subdivision in District 1, and the report is presented by Ms. Durley Navarro, Planner 1.
Good evening, Chair and board members. The rezoning request is for property located on the south side of Hampton Locust Grove Road, east of Luella Road, and west of Brindley Way, as highlighted in green in your exhibit books and shown on the overhead screen. The subject property lies within the Indian Creek Watershed Protection Area. The subject property is zone RA, and the future land use map is low density up to 2 net dwelling units per acre. The applicant's request is to rezone the subject property from RA to R1 for the purpose of a 24-lot single-family residential subdivision on septic with a net density of 0.96 dwelling units per net acre. The applicant's request complies with the future land use map designation of low-density residential, which allows up to 2 dwelling units per acre. Staff has reviewed the applicant's request and recommends approval with 6 conditions shown on the overhead screen. Thank you, and I will be happy to answer any questions.
Okay. Does the board have questions for staff? Okay. If not, we'd like the applicant to come forward, please. Please state your name and address for the record.
Denise Arnold, 360 Corporate Center Court, Suite B, Stockbridge, Georgia.
Okay.
I represent Heritage Property Holdings. We are a developer and builder, and we are in agreement with the conditions. We don't particularly care for them, but we understand them. So we can go along with that. The one that we do would like some consideration on is the sodding of all disturbed areas. These lots are over an acre, so we are going to build homes ranging, it will be a craftsman and farm home style residence. They will be 1,900 square feet up to approximately 2,600 square feet. we do have some adjustments to make to our proposed plan, as well, allowing for the right-of-ways that have been requested in your conditions, the staff's conditions.
Okay. Does the board have any questions for the applicant? Okay. No questions. You may be seated, ma'am. At this time, we'd like to allot 10 minutes for anyone wishing to speak in favor of this case.
That map of the proposed subdivision.
This one?
Yeah.
This one?
No, this.
That one?
My name is Donna Johnson. I live at 101 Brindley Way, which is right here. My sister and I own this property. It's Brindley Trace subdivision.
Okay.
And so we are right here, what is that, on the east side of this proposed subdivision. And our main concern is what kind of buffer there will be between, this is Brindley Way right down here on the other side of Brindley Way, on the west side of Brindley Way. We definitely would prefer to see a residential community rather than anything like commercial. So we do support a residential. Our main concern is buffering, and I appreciate your time.
Thank you. Anyone else would like to speak in favor of this case? If not, okay.
Good evening. I apologize for not being informed. Did I need to register over here? Okay, thank you very much. My name is Eric Adams. I live at 168 Wycliffe, which is in the community directly across the street from where this entrance is proposed to be. I am supportive of the project in a sense of the lot sizes and the home sizes. However, my concern is going to be on the entrance being directly across from Wycliffe subdivision, in addition to the earlier zoning proposal and acceptance of the community that would be just to our east. Because you're going to be adding more entrances in such a small area on that main road. And I understand that if it's going to be widened at a certain point in the future, again, I'm not informed as to when that's going to be, but my only consideration I would like to ask is perhaps if the entrance could be moved farther down. Thank you. That's all I had. Thank you for your time.
Okay, thank you. Anyone else would like to speak in favor of this case? If not, we'd like to allot 10 minutes for anyone wishing to speak in opposition. Okay. No one's coming forward. Does the board have additional questions for the applicant?
Yes.
Please come forward, ma'am.
As far as the, on Brindley Way, having a buffer, what's your position on that?
We'll have to work on it, because we have so many restrictions now with the right-of-way required by the SPLOST there on Hampton Locust Grove Road. That's going to take an additional 35 feet of our property. And also, we're having to increase the right-of-way as one of the conditions by the staff on Luella Road as well. So that's something we're working on. It would just depend on what type of buffer and how big of a buffer, if that can be worked out to make the numbers work on this project.
For staff, in the computations for would that buffer be included or excluded?
So it could be whichever way you prefer. If there's to be a homeowners association, perhaps you would want the buffer to be not included in the house lots. However, there's nothing wrong with the buffer being a landscape buffer easement that may be on each of the house lots in that area. So it depends on what this board feels is best. Would there be a homeowners association?
There will be a homeowners association.
All right. And with your current plan, you had lots that were 150 feet wide, but the requirement's 175?
That is a typo. The layout already represents 175-foot lots.
And as far as, let's see, the entrance, I don't see that moving. So, now that's all I had.
Go ahead. Mr. Carmichael.
Can the applicant restate what her objections were to to staff recommendation number 2 about the sodding of disturbed areas?
They are large lots. I'd rather it just stay 25 foot to the rear, all front yard, side yards, 25 foot to the rear versus saying all disturbed areas because they are septic tank lots.
Does staff have any objections to that?
Well, again, what the applicant is proposing complies with our Unified Land Development Code. There can't be any ground that is left bare. So what that means is that that area that's not sodded and that is disturbed will be seeded. And that's in accordance with our code, but that seed is going to have to take and germinate and grow, and that's going to take some time, and who knows what kind of rain events will happen in the meantime. And the purpose of a condition is to go above and beyond what the code requires.
Let's go to Mr. Richard.
Yes, getting back to the buffer issue for just a moment, perhaps you could consider maybe a 10 or 20 foot easement on the back of lots 1 through 4, where something like Leland cypress could be planted, so that
a natural buffer,
so that people on Brindley Way would have some buffering from the backside of somebody else's homes that they'd have to look into.
Mm-hmm. I don't have a problem with that.
Right.
You know, if we're just going to have
I'd
a
like
planted buffer
see
there.
something like that happen.
To the disturbed area. Now, I think the sod requirement is that if it's a disturbed area, so if you decide not to disturb that area, it's not required for sodding.
I understand that, but I'm thinking about, some of the soils we're going to have to put in specialized septic systems, and the drain fields may have to disturb more of the property. It'd be easier to and more cost-effective to be able to seed and straw those areas that are further out than what just the padded lot that we build on.
Okay. Any additional questions for the applicant at all?
I don't have a question, just a comment. I think the sodding requirement is a bit stringent considering it is an acre lot, and they are probably going to move around a lot of dirt with the septic tank installation. So you might want to consider the suggestion, I think you said 25 feet in the rear, all side and front, so you have the front and sides would be sodded, and then 25 feet in the back of the property would be sodded, and then the rest would be seeded. Yeah.
Well, I would just say, that being that you're giving a suggestion, I would say we maintain consistency, which we have required that in the past. The sodded, fully sodded on disturbed areas. The leeway or the way out of it, just not to disturb those areas. It's not a big requirement. Sewage lines or septic tanks are not that far from most properties, so that's why I recommend just sticking with consistency
That makes
on it.
sense too.
That's
I'm just
fine.
thinking that big acre lot,
Yeah.
but yeah, it's your call. Yeah.
Any additional questions or for the applicant or Mr. V?
And this is for staff, as far as the DOT and doing anything out on the road for a deceleration lane or any of that?
Yes.
Is that required?
Yes, yes, the code will require a deceleration lane along Hampton Locust Grove Road because the functional classification of Hampton Locust Grove Road is an arterial. So that will simply be required regardless.
Will there be a turn lane required?
Only a right turn lane. There may be a traffic study that's required by the code, and that traffic study will determine if a left turn lane is required. Because of the number of these lots is so low, I would doubt that. But the county will consider that. But it's not likely because of the few number of lots.
Okay. As far as the square footage in that area, it's as far as for the heated space for the house. Are you okay with a 2,200 square foot heated space?
I like 1,900 better, but okay.
Okay.
She's honest.
Yeah, exactly. That's the only questions I have.
Any additional questions? Anyone else? Okay. All right. In that case, call the case.
RZ 1923 Heritage Property Holdings LLC of Stockbridge, Georgia requests a rezoning from RA Residential Agricultural to R1 Single Family Residence for property located on the south side of Hampton Locust Grove Road to the west of Brenly Way in land lot 209 of the 2nd District. The property consists of 30.00 plus or minus acres, and the request is for a single-family residential subdivision in District 2, and the report was presented by Ms. Dirley Navarro, Planner 1.
We've heard the case. Do we have a motion?
I move to approve with the 6 staff recommendations, plus 2 more, which would be a minimum heated floor area of 2,200 square feet, and a landscape buffer along Brinley Way of 20 feet. And that would be my motion.
Okay. We have a motion. Do we have a second?
Second.
Second. Any discussion? All in favor? Motion carries. All right. Motion to adjourn.
Second, third, fourth, and fifth.
Adjourn it is.